Welcome to this first session this year of the Children, Adults, Health and Wellbeing Policy Development and Scrutiny panel, and Happy New Year to everybody. I think it's still okay to wish everybody a Happy New Year, isn't it? So I'd like to obviously welcome you all, and I will ask the panel to introduce themselves to you and anybody who's watching online. But having done that, I would then like, if you're speaking, if you could introduce yourself at that moment in time. Thank you. So, my name is Dina Romero, and I'm a councillor for Southdown, and I'm chair of this panel. Liz.
My name is Liz Hardman. I'm vice chair of this panel and ward councillor for Porton.
Good morning, I'm Ruth Malloy, I'm a Western councillor and I'm a voting member of this panel, thank you.
Good morning, Christopher Batten, National representing Teachers and National Education Union, non-voting member.
Good morning, my name is Kevin Burnett, representing Professional Association NEHT and a non-voting member.
Hello, I'm Councillor Joanna Wright, Lambridge Ward, voting member.
Good morning, David Harding, Councillor for the Chew Valley Ward and voting member.
Good morning, my name's Leslie Mansell, I'm the Councillor for Radstock and I'm also the Deputy Leader of the Labour Group.
Good morning everyone, my name is Mark Durnford, I'm the Democratic Services Officer for the panel. Thank you.
Morning, I'm Kerry Williams and I provide the Scrutiny Officer support to the panel.
Just double checking, I've not missed anybody who is on the panel, have I? I don't think so. Thank you everybody. Now turning to Mark to tell us what to do in the event of an emergency.
Thank you very much, Chair. So if the continuous alarm does sound, you must evacuate the building and proceed to the assembly point. From this room, you follow the green running person signs to the exit, using either the marble staircase or the main staircase. Please do not use the lifts. The assembly point for this building is the Orange Grove grassed area just outside Brown's Restaurant, and there is an evacuation chair for use by disabled people who so wish in the corridor outside the Council Chamber Public Gallery. Alternatively, the area at the top of the marble staircase has been designated as safe refuge, where persons needing assistance should assemble. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mark. We now move on to apologies for absence and substitutions, and I've been notified that there are 3 absentees, Councillor Paul Crosley, Councillor Barrett Pankania and Councillor Onkars Saini. Are there any other absence to note or any substitutions? Okay, thank you. Does anyone have any declarations of interest that they wish to declare? Okay, and then we're on to urgent business, and you'll be pleased to note that there is none. And now we move on to the main body of our agenda. But before I invite our first speaker to speak, I would just like to remind everybody that when you are speaking, to put your microphone on, because that also allows the camera to focus on you as well. If you are not speaking, turn your microphone off, otherwise the cameras will still remain on you and not on the next speaker. Thank you. So I'd like to invite Gillian Taylor to speak to us. Thank you, Jill.
Hi, my name is Gillian Taylor and I'm mum to 2 children with special educational needs. I'm also an emergency nurse practitioner who's been working in the IUH for the last 30 years. I'm part of an all-party parliamentary group as well, trying to raise awareness of PKU, which is what my 20-year-old son was born with. He's 19 now. His brain becomes damaged, which is part of life by eating protein, unfortunately. This is hard to avoid long term, and we were made aware of this from when Reece was 8 days old. It was always known to us that he was probably going to struggle in school and may need support with his processing delays. We didn't know that was what he'd got, but we were told he would have cognitive problems. When he started school, indeed, Reece struggled. Judgments were made, unfortunately, by teachers and other people in the school. I was told that Reece was lazy and I was an anxious parent. Unfortunately, the head teacher at the time threatened me with the harder you go, the further people the harder you go, the further people go in the other direction. Obviously, this was like a red rag to a bull when I questioned her, and it made me more determined to get the help for my son. Fast forward 5 years of trying, and by now a very anxious child who now needed CAMP support for his anxiety. This also affected his brain, and his consultant was very concerned about this damage, and so was I. The tribunal was won. To our horror, it revealed that our son had severe processing delays, and he was 5 years behind. How had this been ignored or missed? We made an official complaint to the local authority. We discussed our experience with the local MPs too, and we were promised change for other families in Baines. We paid £2,000 solicitor fees, which I had to pay over and over again. It was worth every penny for Reece. My father was a headmaster of an approved school, lived in Cheshire and spent his life turning people's lives around. I was not a troublemaker, neither was he. He was the president of Health and Social Care in Cheshire. I was simply a mum who wanted the best for my child. Sadly, I've seen this in ED far too often. Children who need help at school that's been missed or ignored for whatever reasons have their mental health affected. They're shoehorned into feeling like bad children by some professionals who, in my opinion, should know better. Attitude is everything. My son ended up requiring CAMS, as I've said to you already. I had inquired so many times about where Reece was up to and not been told where his level was. And the only time that happened was at the tribunal. It cost £30,000 to the local authority. It could have been told for free. My daughter, 2 years younger, same schools, had no clue, was told she was doing fine. Unfortunately, we moved her school off the back of Reece's experience and was told immediately she might have dyslexia. Different school, different teacher, same pathway. 4 years later, another tribunal. My child was diagnosed with dyslexia and ADHD. I do it for a living. I could have told you that. When they addressed it with me, my mind was not on her, it was on Reece. Second tribunal, another £30,000, possibly up to that, which Baines spent on my children. Unfortunately, nobody turned up to that tribunal. I'm told by the judge, his words were, this is normal for Baines. How come no lessons were learnt from the first experience? And, you know, what a waste of money for a very small thing to help my child. She needed blue paper, that was it, and a diagnosis. And that helps people with dyslexia. The blue paper can see things. So, the assessments were never done until that, both tribunals. The assessments cost a lot less than the tribunal. Then I was questioning a lot of this all the time, going down policies and things like that. I'm a medical person, I do all of that. Don't scream and shout. Both my children's reports were never passed on to their schools, from their schools to their college. Why would you assess a child? Why would anybody assess a child and then not pass on their findings? No child, let alone mine, can be helped without passing those findings on. Surely this is a simple improvement that Baines could have made to save time, money and frustration for my children. Who's financially accountable for this waste of resource, and how can I be reassured this will not happen again? I did everything I could for both my children. The level of stress was massive for me. I do that for a living and I enjoy stress. I thrive in an A&E department and it's what I do well, but I didn't expect to have to do it as a mum. I expected other people to be doing that for me. So, basically, both my children are now 19, 17. Reece is still in Baines College, unfortunately, and it isn't a great experience for him. He has got psychology support from his consultant in PKU, not from Baines, unfortunately. I'm told that it's not available. I frequently emailed the SEN team. I got no reply. I spoke to people that are involved in children's services, didn't really get any change. Yes, got an apology, but for me, the bigger picture is the cost, the emotion, the mental health to these children that haven't got a mum like me, that do end up in A&E, that could have just been assessed. So, for me, I'd like to suggest simple things like communication from the school to the college. Somebody make sure that happens, because that doesn't cost anything. Communication is free, and the report that you're doing, or whoever it is that does these on these children, get passed to the school and college. And I think teachers need more support and education in the management of medical things that cross the line with education. And I hope that some of these suggestions and the experience that I've just explained will help make things a bit easier in the future for other families so that they don't have to keep banging on your doors constantly and end up in a tribunal. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Jill. Would you turn your microphone off for a moment? And thank you for sharing your experience with us. Would you be happy to take a couple of factual questions? Thank you. Liz.
Good morning, Gillian. Thank you very much for sharing the experiences with us, which are very upsetting, in fact, in many ways. You've said a number of things that need to happen. Is there anything immediately that could happen that could make things better for your experience, but also for other youngsters?
Communicating the reports. The assessments that were done on my children took so long to get because apparently the cost was so much. I didn't go into the finances of it because obviously that's not of interest to me as a parent. However, I feel that there was a lot more money wasted long term, and as a medic, who my children are now out of education, but I face children every day, yes, pass those assessments on. I believe there's now 2 different teams that have been made since my son's journey started. And they don't seem to be aware of each other, they don't seem to communicate. I've still not got the answer as to whose responsibility it is to pass those assessments that the local authority do to the school that the child is going to or the college. It seems to be mine. So that would be a great help for others.
Gillian, would you mind sharing with us who are these teams? And I hope that's
at the moment question. This is who are they, yeah. So I've been told, I've got a special educational needs email. Now I've been told since then that there's now a primary and a secondary team that's set up. I'd have to look through my emails for their actual email. And I think it comes under SEN primary, SEN secondary, but that's recently been told to me. I've been digging for a long time. And then there's the SEND IAS, so the Special Educational Needs Advice Team, which are helpful, but they're not independent from the SEND team. So you end up not being given helpful advice as a parent that's independent. It still lurches in that way.
Thank you, Jill. Are there any other factual questions from the panel? Joanna.
Are you aware of many other parents in similar situation?
Yes. I'm aware of at least 8 parents that I have been in contact and supporting with in the background. This has been, unfortunately, something for me that I've had dealings with since Reece started in primary school. I wasn't aware of my daughter for a long time.
And is it a present situation?
Yes.
So
I can tell you of 2 people that are going through it at the moment who have exactly the same pathway as me.
Okay, and do they have any idea of how to approach the council and take this forward?
No, I think the advice I've given them is apply for the EHCP yourself. It was 4 years before anybody advised me to do that, and I was told it was a personal persecution before that, was what it felt like for me. They are telling me, they're coming to me now because they didn't believe what I went through. These are their grandchildren, they're the age as me, and I'm going just to apply for the EHCP.
So do you think there should be like an information sheet, so almost when your child starts school, about what issues could come up and how you would approach those things that could be given to parents?
No, I think everybody individually needs to be assessed, and there's so much more neurodiversity now than there ever was, and lack of understanding about what that is, means, and how it affects the child, that judgments are being made. It's the way it's always been. You know, people were treated like, not badly, but we think we know them because of our ideas, and actually that's not the same with every family and parent. So I don't think you can put everybody in a... You can give advice about what might cause a problem, but I don't think you can shoehorn
I'm not asking you to shoehorn. I'm just trying to say, you know, that should you have issues with your child or be concerned that these are the routes, these are the contacts you would make, this is where you would... And do you know of anything like that existing?
No, not at the moment. I haven't found it. I've been told that it is there by other parents from children with much more severe needs. I also volunteer for something called Move the Mind, which is for children with neurological special educational needs that are no longer able to be in school, and it's a horse thing. And there's a lot of parents there who've had exactly the same journey. Their children are much more severe than mine, and they've had no signposting. I've got a friend with a child with cerebral palsy, a grandchild, who is the same thing. They don't know where to go. They've got 3 or 4 different places, but not one owns the lot, if you know what I mean. So, I mean, at the moment for me, I've had the special education needs team, I've had the advice team, then I've had the secondary and the primary team. So there's 4 teams, but none of them are actually moving things to where they need to be. The college or the schools don't know of the changes in my children. So, and I have got, yes, other incidences of other people doing that.
Chair, I know that in our next agenda item, there's a piece on the Community Wellbeing Hub. I'm just wondering if there should be a piece of work within that on how to signpost.
I'm really familiar with the Community Wellbeing Hub because I tried to set up the discharge hub at the IUH, and I left. So I left because my husband died 18 months ago. He worked in the IUH as well, which is why I'm not there now. But the Wellbeing Hub would be a really good place to start, and I think people need to be aware that that's now there, because that would be a massive help to the public. But there's not. Even the hospital don't seem to know how to advertise that, so that would be good for something maybe the local authority do, yeah.
Thank you. Very good suggestion, Jo. And I hope that helps a little bit. But I think actually what would be really useful is if we can pass on your statement and the questions that have arisen to the Cabinet Member for Children's Services, who I know you've already been in contact with as well, just to really highlight this particular issue, particularly around the communications and that lack of joined up thinking.
And again, for me personally, when they end up in an A&E department in a crisis, that's even harder, and I hate seeing all of that. So I think it's important for my job as well as my children and everybody else's. Anything we can do to help.
Thank you, Jill. And maybe, Laura, when it comes to your piece, you might be able to pick up a little bit of this at that point too. So thank you, Jill, for sharing that with us.
Thanks.
And please, you know, you're more than welcome to stay for the next items as well. Okay. I'd now like to turn to Wendy, who is also going to make a public statement.
My name is Wendy Lucas, and today I'm here to address this panel to try to get you to understand what it means to raise a special needs child, continue to look after them into adulthood, and what the closure of Newton House short-term respite facility will do to us, the other families that use it, and those families who are being denied access to it. 28 years ago, I looked forward to starting that roller coaster ride of raising a child. Like everyone around me, I planned for a roller coaster in sunny Florida or warmth, sunshine and Disney. My plane, however, didn't land in Florida, and I didn't get the happy roller coaster ride. My plane landed in Skegness on a rainy November day in a rundown Butlins. That's what your world feels like when you enter the special needs community. Over the last 28 years, I've learned to be an OT, a nurse, a doctor, a care worker, a teacher, and a social worker. I'm not really qualified for any of those things, but I am the world's leading expert in one field, my child and her needs, and the needs of my family. For 28 years, I've literally fought the system relentlessly on every front, day in, day out, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, every year. Whilst I've been doing that, my husband has been my daughter's carer and receiving about 84 pence an hour for doing it, so no minimum wage for him. For 15 years, we've not had a single holiday. Our last social services review was in 2017, and then since then we've had very little support or contact from adult social care. So much for meeting their statutory responsibilities. My daughter uses Newton House every week, Monday through to Wednesday, and has done so for 10 years. Over that time, we've built up trust with Newton House and worked with them to ensure that Rhiannon is safe and happy and well cared for. This is absolutely the most important thing for us. Twice in our lives, we've had the devastating early morning visit from a police officer who's informed us that our precious girl has been physically abused, by individuals who were contracted and paid for by this council to provide her with care. One was a teacher at Fossway School, and the second time as a personal assistant provided by Adult Social Care. Furthermore, Newton House is one provider in a complex care plan which sees a number of providers interlocking to provide Rhiannon's complete care package. Removal of Newton House collapses the entire plan, and with it our lives, ability to function, and my ability to work and provide for my family. Just before Christmas, we received a bombshell via Facebook that Newton House was closing, which left us devastated. Initially, we were told it was closing by the end of January, although after much protest, it was subsequently extended to the end of March. Newton House is the only facility in Baines that can provide short-term respite to this group of profoundly disabled adults with complex health needs. There is no other option within Baines. I've heard statements from various sources that it will be replaced with care in the community, but this won't help us or give us the breaks from our caring responsibilities that we need in order to function. Outside of area care is also being suggested, with places like Minehead suggested, but no firm details on where or how far away this may be. These are not options that work on any level. So why is Newton House closing? None of the stories I've been told add up. Firstly, we've been told that it doesn't cover its costs, especially as they are now facing a higher minimum wage and additional national insurance contributions. However, these costs surely will be passed over to Baines by Dimensions, will they not? Newton House apparently operates at only 60% utilisation. But why? Families in Baines have been told for some time that space is not available. There are more than enough families to fill the 40% of Newton House that's not currently being utilised, so why not fill it? I've also heard that Dimensions wants to move 3 full-time clients from another location into Newton House because the other location has been deemed non-compliant. So the needs of 3 individuals matter more than the needs of the 20 or so families that currently rely on Newton House. 3 full-time users also don't fill Newton House to 100% capacity. So why can't both groups be kept happy by running Newton House with a mixture of long-term and short-term residents to achieve the 100% utilisation? I've spoken to many of the families that currently use Newton House over the past 2 weeks, and a consensus is becoming clear. If we lose this short-term respite facility, many families will not be able to continue to look after their loved ones at home any longer. If we all say this to Baines Council, where will our children go, and what cost impact will that generate for adult social care? Without Newton House, our lives don't function. We won't be able to do what we do. All of us need concrete proposals about what will happen next, not platitudes, not vague promises, and not devastating uncertainty. In a letter dated 12th of December, Suzanne Westhead stated that until we have confirmed alternative respite arrangements, we will work with Dimensions to ensure continued access to the current respite arrangements at Newton House. I hope that's a promise she'll stick to. I look to this panel to investigate what's happening here and to step up and provide support to our desperate families. Baines is a Liberal Democrat council in an area of Liberal Democrat members of Parliament. Throughout the general election, Ed Davies shouted from the rooftops and the top of water slides that his party was committed to ensuring that carers receive a fair deal and the support they need. In recent years, party leaders of all colours, Gordon Brown, David Cameron, have all had special needs children. Keir Starmer recently lost a brother who had more than his fair share of difficulties. Yet still we have a broken system of adult social care. Why? What will it take for politicians at all levels to just give us what we need? What we need is Newton House, good local care that we can walk into any time of day or night to ensure that our special needs people are safe, well and happy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Wendy. That was, I think, for many of us, quite an upsetting story, so thank you. Would you be happy to take some questions?
Good morning, Wendy, and many thanks for coming here and for telling us your story and just opening a lot of information about Newton House that many of us were not aware of. Firstly, you said that you had been promised that the needs of your daughter would be assessed and alternative provision would be provided before Newton House will close. So can you advise us, have you been offered any alternative provision, and what alternative provision do you think is available?
We haven't been offered anything. We've had a visit from a duty social worker, the first visit since 2017, who came and did a reassessment of Rhiannon's needs. He's phoned me once since then to ask about would we consider share lives. If he'd actually read Rhiannon's file, he would know that shared lives was considered years ago and Rhiannon's health needs are too complex. He then offered me a PA. Quite how that works for overnight respite, I failed to see. Not unless Baines is planning on putting me up in a hotel so that I can get a night's sleep and the PA is going to live in my house. It doesn't work. So we've had no concrete proposals. There was apparently a meeting last week where the social worker thought he was going to be told what alternatives were available. Going by what he told me, they were simply told that the commissioning officer was still working on it.
Thanks for that. Most people won't know what a personal assistant involves and what shared lives are. Would you like to just explain what they are, because they may be put forward as alternatives to us?
Shared lives is where you are paired with a family who's prepared to take your young person for respite. That works fine for children with lesser disabilities, but the children, I keep calling them children because they will always be children, but they are young adults who attend Newton House, are the most complex young people that Baines provide assistance to. They all have profound medical needs. Most of them have physical disabilities. So it's very unlikely that you are going to find an ordinary family to be paired up with who, for a start off, are going to have a house that will accommodate people in wheelchairs, people who've got these profound medical needs. Again, a PA is great if you just want someone to take your child out on a Saturday morning. We actually need respite care so that we can sleep. We only sleep fully 2 nights a week. The other 5, when she's at home, we cannot guarantee that we will get a full night's sleep because of her needs. Also, what staggers me when the social worker suggested it, as part of his initial meeting with us, I gave him a tour of our house. We live in a 3-bedroom house. All 3 bedrooms are occupied. Quite where this PA is going to go all night, I'm not quite sure. And also, if we're still in the house and Rhiannon is loud enough to wake the PA up, she's still going to wake us up. So it's just not an alternative. Places in Minehead, I think, were mentioned for one family. That sort of distance just doesn't work because we have complex care packages. So, for example, on a Wednesday morning, my daughter goes from the end of her respite at Newton House directly to Connections Day Centre for the day. If she's in Minehead, how's that transportation going to work? Is my husband going to have to get up anyway, drive all the way to somewhere in Minehead or Gloucester to pick her up, to then drive her to Connections Day Centre, which is literally 1 minute's drive from our house? The packages will not work without Newton House. And I'm staggered that I know there are numerous families who are being told and have been told for a number of years that short-term respite is not available. Yet we have Newton House operating at 60%. So why are they being told it's not available? I can fill this chamber with families who are desperate, who are on their knees, who have desperately been asking for additional overnight respite, and they are consistently being told that it does not exist.
Many thanks indeed, and I would like to make just one last point. just making a point, actually. You've mentioned 60% under occupancy, and it's very hard and difficult for us all to understand this. And maybe this will be taken up later on. There's a report on adult social care. Maybe that can be explained to us. And also, you've provided us with a solution which could work for everybody. So perhaps that might be taken up.
And I don't think anyone is trying hard enough to help. I get Dimensions are a private company. Let's not be under any illusion. They have to make a profit. They have to cover their costs. But why is the council not working with them to keep this asset open? It is the only one in Baines. It's ridiculous to close it.
Thank you. I have another person who wants to ask you a question, but I hope you'll stay for the next item, where I hope our Director of Adult Social Care and also Cabinet Member might be able to answer some of the questions and the points that you've raised. Leslie.
Thank you for coming along, Wendy, and telling us your experiences. My name is Leslie Mansell. I'm one of the councillors for Radstock. Can you explain who actually pays for this service? Do you pay Newton House, or does Baines pay Newton House? And then also, was there any kind of consultation with you with regards to the proposal to take away the service and close it? Thank you.
Our respite package is paid for by Baines because of the unfortunate experience that we had with a PA that I alluded to. I've absolutely refused to be responsible for hiring assistants for Rhiannon. So our care package is completely run by Baines. I actually found out that Newton House was closing via Facebook because the letter notifying me didn't get to me. I found out late on a Friday night after all the offices were closed and literally had to sit there and think, what we're going to do. In terms of consultation, there hasn't been any. If Richard hadn't made everybody aware, Newton House would have closed without a murmur because the 20 families that use it wouldn't have had a voice. Like I said, I don't blame Dimensions. We've got to live in the real world. These companies have to, as a minimum, cover their costs. They're not charities, they are commercial companies. But the fact that we've allowed it to get in this position, to all intents and purposes, Bath and North East Somerset have not worked with this company to ensure that this asset remains open, quite frankly, beggars belief, when, again, I will say it is the only place that we can use. And if all 20 families turn around and say, Director of Adult Social Services, there's 20 wheelchairs in the corridor and 20 suitcases, we can't do this anymore, what's that going to cost you?
Thank you. Joanna.
Thank you very much for your information. I have two questions. One, is there a statutory duty that the council has to give you respite care?
As a carer, I believe there is a statutory duty that you have to assess our needs. And if that is the need that comes out of that assessment, and trust me, 28 years of only sleeping 2 nights a week, then yes, that is a statutory obligation that will no longer be met by this council because there will not be a respite facility within Baines's boundaries. They will be reliant on finding somewhere in another county, which they then will not control. We've spent the last 4 years looking, because we need more respite, not less as she gets older. We've looked at every facility in Gloucester, we've looked at every facility in Bristol, and the other issue that you have is if you are booking a facility and you do not belong to that county, if that county has an emergency for whatever reason, your booking can be bounced at a moment's notice, cancelled, so that they can slot in their emergency. As families, we can't live like that. We need routine. These children all have the kind of disability where they need to know where they're going and it needs to be the same all the time. Changes are a massive impact to them. And that is the other problem with the closure of Newton House. No one's got any firm proposals. All of these children will take weeks to be integrated into anywhere new without sort of severe meltdowns. And the longer it goes on towards this deadline of the beginning of April now, with nothing firm being identified, we can't make plans to introduce our daughter to anywhere new, to go and satisfy ourselves that it's the right environment for her. Even when you go to somewhere new, it doesn't always work out. You have to be prepared to change. So I hope someone's got multiple options in the pipeline, because not all the children will fit in these boxes.
That was my second question, was really about further respite care and out of area. Where else is there? And is there something available?
No, there isn't. Every single place that we looked at was unsuitable.
Thank you, Wendy. I just have a couple of questions myself. I don't know whether you'll know the answer to the first one. So you've said that Dimensions is a private company. So do you know whether Baines is the only customer of the company? It's fine if you don't know the answer.
I believe for Newton House, yes, all the children live in Baines. There are no children coming from out of area. And there is a long enough waiting list of families within Baines to fill it. And in fact, some of the residents that use it now have asked for increases in their care package and been told that Newton House doesn't have room. And yet now we're being told it's 40% underutilised. So why for the last 18 months have we been told they don't have the room? We were told after COVID, when we came out of COVID, they asked us what we needed. And top of the agenda was, I'd just like a holiday. I'd just like a whole week to have a holiday without room. We were told that Newton House didn't have the room to accommodate 2 one-week breaks. At weeks of their choosing, my employer was willing to give me time off to match whatever Newton House said was available. And we were told they didn't have the room. And yet we are now being told that they're 40% underutilised. And this is what I can't understand.
Thank you. And another question, again, you might not know the answer to this, but if you choose an alternative place, have you had any guarantees that Bath and North East Somerset Council will still pay?
No, I've had no information. And like I said, we've been looking within our own council care package. When we asked for the holiday and Newton House said they couldn't meet our requirements because they were full, we were actually sent by the social workers to look at all sorts of alternative locations to see if they could give us the 2 weeks holiday, 2 different week-long holidays in the year. We visited about 5 or 6 places. We went up to Gloucester, we went the other side of Bristol. None of them were suitable, and actually every institution said, why are you even here looking at us? You belong to Baines, so why are they sending you to the other side of Bristol or to Gloucester? It's too far.
Thank you, Wendy. I'm not seeing any other questions. I'm not going to take questions outside the panel. Okay. So please stay and hear. Hopefully the Director and Cabinet Member will be able to give you some answers to the very to the points that you've raised in your statement and to the questions and answers that have arisen following it. So thank you again. Okay. Next on my list, I have Derek Greenman. I don't know if you wanted to speak or if you're just here to listen. Sorry, you would like to speak. Thank you. apologies.
Hello, my name is
put you
Derek
off your
Greenman.
slide.
I'm stepson. My stepson, Michael Canella, is 30 years of age. In fact, it was the same week as we received the information to say that Newton House was closing. To give you a rundown of our situation, we started off many years ago with PAs, which unfortunately we could no longer keep, one of which wanted to obviously go on and earn more money, and the council weren't willing to pay any more money for those services. So we lost her. Then we had a retiree as well. So that was our first blow. So we lost both PAs, and they provided access to the local authority day centres, and also taking them out for the day to try and stimulate him as much as possible. To give you a background on Michael's condition, he's got quadriplegic cerebral palsy. He has no speech. He's a full-time wheelchair user. He does suffer from epilepsy, but thankfully not often. He has very complex needs, of which the social teams have always said he's incredibly complex. Yet, bit by bit, we've lost all the support that we've had in the past. The bombshell regarding Newton House left us completely stunned over Christmas. I saw Councillor Crossley outside my home, and that's how he informed me about what was going on, or he was going to look into what was going on, and hence the reason that I'm here, and also because of this gentleman on my right. I have to say, that lady over there, everything she has said is very eloquently put, and I believe that that says pretty much everything for everyone in our situation. We can't continue to look after our children indefinitely. I'm now 65. My wife is 57. He's really hard work. The respite was an absolute godsend. Without that, we are really in big trouble. And I think if the council don't look at this again, they're going to reap the whirlwind, because there are going to be families, like that lady said, who will not be able to cope any longer, and you will have to find full-time residential care for those young people. I don't think I can really add much more to that, really, but we feel absolutely devastated by this decision. And it's almost like you don't have a future. That's how it makes you feel. You feel completely lost. Completely lost. I can't even begin to explain how I feel. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Derek. Would you be okay if a couple of questions are asked of you?
Yeah.
Turning to Liz.
Many thanks for coming along and telling us your story. And it's a similar question I've asked before, because we have been told that there will be an assessment of your son's needs, and a provision will be put in place. So has any assessment as such been put in place?
No, we've had a phone call from a new social worker who we've never met yet, and that is basically it. We're waiting for him to make an assessment. But as far as I'm concerned, we've always felt that we've never really had the support from the social network team. We've always pretty much, COVID is a prime example, I don't know. In our case, because we had two PAs, those PAs, because of Michael's needs, he was on immunosuppressants. So we couldn't risk anybody coming in and out to the house. So during lockdown, we were literally locked in our house. The only person that went out was me. My wife was also on immunosuppressants for thyroid eye disease, and so she couldn't leave the house. So I was the only way that we could get food into the house. And in the meantime, instead of those people being put on furlough, we had to pay, from Michael's budget, we had to pay the PAs in all the time that we weren't receiving anything. Now, how is that economic sense? Because I don't know what that is.
Thank you, Derek. Are there any other questions? Otherwise, as I've said to everyone else who's spoken, please stay and hear what the Cabinet Member and the Director have to say. Hopefully they will be able to answer some of the points that you've raised. So I have one final speaker who if it's very quick, Joe.
It sounds like there's been years of not being supported. So, I mean, I know that we're now going to lose, in inverted brackets, Newton House, or that issue has raised itself. But it seems like there's a lack of conversation with you over many years. And how would you, what would you want from the council to support you in that process?
As I said, during the COVID situation, we were just left high and dry. Nobody communicated with us. Not even a how are you. It was quite unreal and so isolating. And I think that's the other thing that everybody has to understand. It's you feel so isolated. It's lovely when actually this is quite good for me. I know that he's, because I'm talking to people in a similar situation. And you do start to believe that you're the only one, and you do feel incredibly isolated.
Have you been aware of this scrutiny committee before? And how you could come to this committee and bring up your issues?
I wasn't ever made aware.
Thank you.
Thank you, Derek. And I sort of thank, in his absence, Paul Crosley for making sure you were aware.
Could I just add one thing? And my wife would be here, but unfortunately she's fortunately she's at home looking after my son because he hasn't got provision on a Monday and a Friday. So that's why. Otherwise, my wife would be here as well. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much, Derek. And thank you, everybody, for all of your statements. I think we've all been very, it's a bit of an understatement, really, but I think we've been very moved by everything that you've had to say. And I do hope that we'll get some answers in the next item. But before that, I believe Councillor Moss wished to make a small statement.
Thank you very much, Dina. Yes, just a brief statement about because this is the meeting to look at the budget and the budget proposals heading into 25-26. Also, just make a brief comment as well about Newton House. But the main reason I want to speak is, and I think, as you know, I chair the corporate scrutiny panel. We will be looking at the budget as a whole towards the end of this month, not only the remit of this panel, but across the whole budget. But I think it's right to make a comment about social care and the social care proposals, because they make up the majority of Baines's budget. There are national issues with social care, which we all know, but locally there have been budget issues for a number of years with Baines, with social care overspending and creating actual problem within budget management through a financial year. And the reason without going too much detail, I'm making this statement is I've looked at the budget papers for January 2025. I've actually looked at the budget papers and proposals for January 2024. And I have to say there is a lot of similarity in proposals, language, not necessarily the numbers. But of course we know that those budget numbers went to the February 2024 budget meeting of Baines, and then we had overspends running through the year. So can I ask, what assurance can we have that the similar language, the similar lack of detail, the similar proposals are going to bring out a similar outcome? I mean, Einstein talked about how repeating actions and expecting different outcomes was not something that should be done. So please can we have an assurance here, because I'll certainly be asking the question at the end of the month, about what is it about these budget proposals that are different to last year's in whether they can be delivered. Also, can I ask as well, we've got today's meeting, we've got a meeting on the 28th of January, which is across the whole scrutiny panel, so it's all backbenchers commenting on the budget before I report to the 25th of February full budget meeting. Please can you assure me there's going to be no surprises between now and then with different suggestions, different proposals and different issues. Just very briefly as well on Newton House. I mean, it's very upsetting to hear the details of how it's affecting individual families. But can I just step back slightly, because my question is, as leader of the Labour opposition on the council, is how did we actually get here? How did we get to the point of letters going out in December with just a few months' notice of closure of services? And for background, Dimensions isn't a private company, it's actually a not-for-profit. It's a social enterprise, it's registered as a housing association, it's registered and regulated by the Care Quality Commission, it's also registered by the Housing Association. And I'll quote from their last set of accounts. The group is forecasting a surplus for the next year from its main operational activities and has sufficient cash facilities available which provide adequate resources for the group's day-to-day operations. This is not a financial crisis on Dimensions' part that has formed a crisis reaction from Baines. Quite rightly, they have the right as an independent organisation to plan how they want to provide their services. But I'll be asking, please can I have a timeline of correspondence between Dimensions and Baines? Because if this is a planned response to a change of circumstances or a change of policy by Dimensions, surely this should have been correspondence about this prior to December 24 heading into March 25, just to make sure this doesn't happen again, because there's either questions to Baines or there's questions to Dimensions about how this situation was allowed to occur when there is not a financial crisis in the organisation that forces that change of circumstances. And I have to say, as a member of the Foster panel, the idea that Shared Lives as a service could provide support for young adults with severe complex needs actually shows a disappointing lack of understanding of how Shared Lives works. So thank you for allowing me to speak, Chair, but those are the 2 points I want to make coming into the panel.
Thank you, Robin. And I hope you will stay to hear the, well, hopefully some of your points addressed, particularly around the relationship between Dimensions and the Council and that clarification of the financial position in the Adult Social Care update. And if your time allows, to stay and hear about the budget proposals as well.
Oh, yes, Chair.
Thank you. Do we have any questions? Liz? No? Any other questions from any other member of the panel? No. Thank you. I don't believe I've missed any of our public speakers. In that case then, I'm going to move on to the next item on our agenda, which, in a change to our agenda plan, I'm bringing Adult Social Care Update up one item. So I will then ask Alison, the Cabinet Member, to introduce the item, and I believe you're going to be supported by the Director for Adult Social Care, Suzanne Westhead, and indeed Becky as well. So.
Hello, yes. Yes, for anyone who doesn't know, I am the Cabinet Lead for Adult Social Care. And this report is just an update across adult social care, and it includes reference to Newton House. That is covered in it, but it's one of a number of items in the report which gives it an overview. So I'm going to hand over to Suzanne to take us through the report, and obviously I'm happy to answer questions alongside with Suzanne and other officers.
Thank you very much. And over to you, Suzanne.
Thanks, Councillor Bourne, and thank you, Chair. This report is an update since the services were transferred back from HCRG on the 1st of April 2024. So there's a number of areas that I wanted to update the panel on, and one of those will be Newton, but also talk about our performance and the commissioning team. And finally, I'll finish with community partners update, and Becky Brooks will also speak on this item after that. So just as a reminder, we had 237 staff transfer to the Council in 2024. We had day services, 2 day services, cars, wood and connections, shared lives, which we've talked about already, supported living and assisted employment service, and also our statutory social worker function also returned to the Council on the 1st of April. So they've been back with us now a number of months, so it'll be a year in April. And this report also is an update of the overview of our performance and the key areas to note in the performance is that we're benchmarked across the country on 22 performance indicators, and the Council measures well in 17, and they're better than most other councils, and on 12 we're in the top quartile. So it's just to note that areas of concern for us under our performance, and we're doing quite a lot of work on, is waiting times for a Care Act assessment, occupational therapy assessments. Now, when the service came back on the 1st of April, we had over 200 people waiting for a Care Act assessment. You'll see from my note that's significantly decreased since we took the service over. The other area that we're focusing on is reviews, and actually you've heard some people talk about the reviews earlier on, and we're focusing on increasing our reviews. Our reviews at the moment are better than the national average. We have an increased demand and activity, in particular in mental health and in older people and learning disabilities. So we're seeing complexity increase in all of those areas. To give you an idea that 3 or 4 years ago, if I'd come here, I would have said the average age of an older person that comes into adult social care is 87 years. As it stands today, it's 91 years. So people are generally coming into adult social care at a later stage in their lives, but they're coming in with more complex needs. An update on commissioning. To manage some of this demand and support, we have an all-age commissioning approach. It's a new model of care that we have got, and we're focusing on children's services, which includes SEND and targeted help as well. And this new model is Appendix 1 at the back of the report. It's very new, but the focus is around start well, live well and age well. And then we've got a commercial and a quality side to the model as well, to focus and work with companies like Dimensions around commercial sensitivity. I want to take some time to talk about Newton House, and I wanted to thank the parents who came to talk today, because I think coming to a meeting like this can be really tough, and the level of honesty that they've given us to try and understand the issues they go through. We do hear, I've spoken to a number of people in Newton House, family members over the last month, and we do understand the importance of respite. As a reminder, we buy those services from Dimensions, we buy those beds from Dimension Care, and earlier on in the year they told us that from their point of view that the occupancy was low and they wanted to review the service. Now,
both Councillor Bourne and myself, when we became aware of the changes, we asked for a pause because we feel there's much more work to be done around respite before we can close, before we can re-provide Newton House. There is no intention to close Newton House. There is a great demand on Newton House, whether it's for respite or residential care. What we need to do is, and I've said before, is we take a pause. We're talking to people. Some people have had their assessments. Not all people have had their assessments. Everybody has been contacted. There are certain people, 3 people in the room today and their families, they will need residential respite. PAs won't work for those cases. Shared lives won't work for those cases. Of the 22 cases that we've been involved in, there are 5 people who no longer need respite. The reason why they don't need respite is they've gone into independent living, independent 24-hour supported living. So we do know that we have to slow the whole process down. We're pausing, we're working with families. We've asked Dimensions to organise a meeting with families, and they're in the process of doing that so that they can hear from the families as well about some of the concerns. Dimensions will also be watching this live. They have made some, what they would say, there's a lot of learning from this as well, from their point of view. As a reminder, it's a 5-bedded unit. It is, at the moment, 60% used. It's those people who are a Care Act assessment and they meet the requirements of the Care Act assessment that use Newton House. We have stopped, we have paused, and we are looking at different options at the moment with Dimensions, and Dimensions are working very closely with us. It's not our service, it's not run by us, and it's a service that's not owned by us. So we need to work with Dimensions to find the right approach for the families that have come today and for all of the 17 families who are using respite. Okay, so that's the update on Newton House, and both Councillor Bourne and I are happy to take some questions after this meeting. Just a quick reminder about our provider services. We've got a mixed service. As a council, we have a big provider provision that we run ourselves, which is 2 care homes, 7 extra care housing, and then we have the two community day services as well. So we have a big service that we run as a provider service, but it's a mixed economy in adult social care. We purchase from the market as well as provide services. So really the final point I wanted to make then was around community partners. You know that we've been working with community partners for the last year about our new models and our approach to the third sector and working with third sector. You'll see in the report that we've had a number of engagement events with the community sector, and we're working hard to make sure that the model around community services is working well. In the report also we have an update on public health and what they're commissioning, and if there are any questions please ask Becky Reynolds, who's the Director of Public Health. As a council, we're getting very close to starting our procurement process for the third sector, and both Becky Brooks and I, who's here in front of me, are working closely on the next steps in the sector. Becky was going to offer some words, and then I thought we'd go back to questions after that. Thank you.
Suzanne, could you just turn your microphone off?
Thank you for the reminder. Thanks, Suzanne. Good morning, everyone. My name is Becky Brooks. I'm the Director at Bath and North East Somerset Third Sector Group, otherwise known as 3SG. We support the third sector organisations across Baines, and we have around 250 members.
within our network. My job primarily is to support those organisations, and I do lots of advocacy work in that space. Last Christmas, we knew that the council had to make, I think it's around 1.3 million's worth of savings to the third sector across Baines, and ever since I've been a regular feature in this room. Suzanne and I have been working very closely together, actually, and I would say that that is becoming a good working relationship, and I'm positive about the future in that respect and how we can work together to really make long-lasting and impactful change in terms of the way in which services are commissioned in the future. But this system change will take a long time, and it has become apparent that we won't be able to make real change in terms of the way in which a service is being procured. But what will happen is that the council has been listening through these sessions that we've been running. I am starting to see better dialogue and communication, which is so welcome. But what we do need to do now is to give those organisations the answers that they need in terms of timelines and time frame, and that is what I'm really pushing for now. We have one more session that's coming up at the end of this month on the 28th, and what's becoming really apparent through the organisations that I support is that the room is very split. They either want to just push the button and get on with it so that they can plan. A lot of these organisations have leases to sign, they have staff to pay, they need to make budgeting decisions about what happens next. And so uncertainty, as we're seeing people that are facing Newton House decisions, uncertainty and actually whilst pausing and stopping can be very helpful, it can also be very unsettling. It does have to be necessary sometimes for this deep work that needs to be done for those systems. I think, so what's becoming very clear in the session that we need to run next, I think this will be the last session that we run before the official procurement process starts. So it's the last chance for our third sector providers to kind of really be heard in that space. We're inviting Laura Ambler, who sat behind me, Place Director for the ICB in Baines, and Becky Reynolds, Director of Public Health, also sat behind me. What's becoming really clear is that we need to have discussions around how all the procurement seems to have come at once this time, and we want to better understand in the sector how procurement decisions are being made in alignment with both the ICB and the Council. So we want to see how that all interlinks, and if it does. So that's going to be our focus for our next session. And then moving forward, I hope that we'll just continue to have this regular dialogue and try and find a way to better connect the third sector and the local authority together, and how we can look at procurement and just taking the stress and uncertainty away from the third sector as a whole. Like Councillor Moss, I am still very concerned about the savings that need to be made, and we've heard firsthand from those very brave families that have come today about what happens when those services are at risk and the real effect that it has on families and people's lives. I remain frustrated by the government's refusal to exempt the third sector from national insurance payments. These things are going to put huge stress on the third sector, and we need them now more than ever. So I will keep pushing for as long as it takes for investment, for support, and for conversations. And I think what's really been highlighted today is the need for greater communication. People don't like being left in limbo, and they don't like uncertainty, and it's so important that we keep communicating. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Becky. I note that in this report we also have quite a big section that's around public health. I don't know, Becky, if you also wanted to speak.
Thank you, Chair. I'm very happy to leave it until the time when we take questions, rather than trying to sort of assume what some of the questions might be. So I'm happy to leave it until any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Becky. So I now open this item up for questions, and Liz is very quick off the mark there. Okay, Liz, ask your question.
Thank you. Obviously, I want to talk first of all and ask questions about Newton House. Suzanne, I don't think you've really addressed any of the issues that have been raised by the speakers here and about what we have been finding out about Newton House. You haven't reassured us that you, in your talks and discussions with Dimensions, that you're going to insist and, ensure for many of the families. You have mentioned other families who have alternative provision now provided, but we're hearing that an awful lot of families still want this respite care provision provided. So we need you to reassure us that you are going to talk to Dimension. I mean, Dimension is being paid for by Baines. We have heard that they want to use all of Newton House as for residential accommodation for adults. So we're still going to be paying them, and I'm just hoping that we're going to be paying them enough so that we can ensure that we get respite care for the people who obviously need it. And you haven't really assured us that this is what's going to happen. This is what the public are saying. This is what this panel, I can feel what people are thinking here. This is what we really need to hear from you, from Baines Council, from our Adult Social Care Director, that you are going to make sure that Newton House does stay open for respite care. I mean, you've assured us it's going to stay open, but if it's going to stay open for residential accommodation for adults, it's not totally what is required. And also, what's been highlighted by my colleague, Councillor Moss, is that Dimensions is not in a difficult position. They are making a profit, they are doing well out of Baines, they are getting enough money to run this respite care home, we're assuming, but maybe, I don't know, it's more profitable for them to have residential accommodation for adults. Perhaps that's what is behind this. So that would be my very first question, and I'll ask others later on. But really, we do need to make sure that Newton House is open. Just digging into this a little more deeply, I mean, how early did you know this was happening? Did Dimensions tell you? Do we know when Dimensions decided to do something about this respite care home? So that would be interesting to find out as well. Thank you.
Do you want me to answer now, or do you want to take some question?
If you answer that now, because I don't know whether the questions are going to be on the same lines or not. It may indeed answer some of those questions. Thank you.
Councillor Harden, I'd love to sit here and assure everybody that there will be no change. I'm not in a position to do that at the moment. We're working with Dimensions to find a way forward, and that's why it's so important that we have this meeting later on this month to talk about what the options are. I've heard very strongly from the people here about how important it is. I have a statutory responsibility to offer respite, and where the needs are residential as well. So I can't honestly say that I have concluded my discussions with them. I've heard the voices very strongly, and I'll be taking that back to Dimensions. And yes, I appreciate it is a very difficult position when I can't say for certain that this is where we are. We do not run Dimensions. And what Councillor Moss said about how well Dimensions are doing, it's nationally, it's not locally. It won't just be around Baines, it'll be it's a country-run business. What I can say about Dimensions is that they've worked really closely with us. They've told us of the position that they found themselves in, and that was earlier on the year. They advised the commissioners that they wanted to have further discussions around the use of Newton House. Now, I've got to take all of this back to them and talk it through with them, and then I'm happy to come back to the families and to the panel with an update.
I think that would be very useful indeed. I think we have somebody who'd like to ask a question. Normally we don't allow members of the public to ask questions from the floor, but I think in this case we will allow it. Okay.
Becky, I'd just like to ask you for Dimensions. You mentioned you're an advocate. So if you're an advocate for all the families, did you communicate with them as a company before? Because obviously as a nurse, I'm an advocate for all my patients, and I communicate with them first.
I don't work with Dimensions specifically, so I work as an infrastructure body for third sector and veins.
Yeah.
This is the first time I was aware of this going on today. Yeah, they're not a member of our...
So you didn't advocate for the families first? Was that my mistake in
I
what you said? I thought I'd heard you say, so I was saying, would you communicate with them all? Right, okay.
So my role is to strengthen the organisations who then go out and do the work.
Okay. And so the alternative when you house, if it has to not take people for respite, would be a hospital setting, assuming, because we've heard that there's no other alternative.
I'm really very sorry, but we just are not really, you can see it's my first time as chair here, and I'm very sorry I'm going to have to stop you there because we need now to go to members of the panel to ask them the questions.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I'd just like to thank all our speakers today. As someone who worked with disabled children for 25 years, your stories really resonated with me. I've got a number of points/questions, some of which have perhaps been asked. So we do really need to know when the timeline on this and whether we were basically presented with a fait accompli. And it is pleasing to hear that the decisions have been paused for now, although I do understand it leaves people in limbo. We do need to know how Dimensions UK arrived at this decision, and I know our chair isn't here. I don't know if we're able to ask someone from Dimensions UK to come here, actually. With respect, if I may, to points around the financial crisis of Dimensions UK, we don't know for certain their financial situation. Their surplus at the last time that I could find was £300,000. They have 7,000 employees, so the proposed increase in national insurance that's been announced and to come in April, it could clearly threaten that surplus by several times over. If I may, please, to Susanna or Alison or both, would it be helpful going forward to know the names of the people who are seeking respite care and who are seeking increases in respite care? Because clearly that increases the demand and would help, presumably, with cash flow to Dimension UK. Those are my points. Thank you.
Susanna, are you going to answer, or Alison?
I would. I'm not sure my system is working. Can you hear me okay? Yes, yeah, okay. You raised a very good point, Councillor, about national insurance. And that's going to be across the charitable sector and the independent sector, so like Dimensions, and that is a real issue for all of the businesses, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later on in the savings report. The work with you talked also about a time frame. I'm not in a position to give a time frame yet until we have this family engagement meeting with Dimensions, and then I can come back with a time frame. It's important to know that we're working through this on a sort of a daily basis at the moment. I do know all of the people who, there was 22 people who were using the service. It's now 17. We do know that I talked earlier on about the greater pressure on people with learning disabilities because they're more complex. People are living longer, and many people children are surviving birth that wouldn't have survived before. So we also know that not everybody wants residential respite. So there's a range. People need a range because all their needs are different. And one of the things I've been speaking to about my assistant directors is we probably need to do quite a bit of work now since we've brought the services back on what's the offer of respite. What's the real offer of respite, and what do the individuals want, and what do their families want? So this is the part of that dialogue now. So thank you for those questions.
Jo.
Thank you. First of all, Councillor Bourne, how will you be taking forward a review on respite care across Bath and North East Somerset for their residents?
Well, we do currently provide a range of respite care. Newton House is one of the areas where respite care is provided for people with learning disabilities. It is the only respite care we provide for people with very complex needs, with physical disabilities as well as learning disabilities. But we also have other overnight respite care in a facility, and also through shared lives. And also we provide respite care through the day services. So there is a range of respite care that's provided.
And I hear very much what you're saying, but we've clearly heard from public speakers today who have clearly told us that they have not been listened to, they've not been consulted on, they've been in serious problems for years, and there's been no conversation with them. So what I'm essentially asking from, I would imagine, this panel, is that there needs to be some kind of review of where we are and how we've got to be here today. And I guess that's the question I'm asking. It says in the paper that I'm just looking at the financially Newton House is unviable. So, I mean, that is a clear statement in this paper today. We don't know any information on that. We don't know where it's come from, who's led it, whether it's Baines, whether it's the organisation running it. So we have no information in this room, and it just seems really peculiar to me that the scrutiny panel is expected to sit here and look at this paper, yet has no actual detail. So will you be coming back to the next scrutiny panel with that detail?
Thank you for the question. It's unlikely we'll come back with lots of detail for the next meeting. We'll come back with a timeline after we've spoken to the families and the individuals about what's the next steps. We do not own or run Dimensions. I have to work very closely with them. The issue around the funding, we fund those dementia care beds. But of course, Dimensions would want 100% occupancy. Of course they would, because that will be how they are paid. So that's why they're saying it's not working, we haven't got enough of demand. Now, you heard here today that people talked about there is a demand. They want us to do some more work on respite. I'm hearing that people want to be involved in this as well.
Hence why I've asked for a review of this process, because quite clearly,
step, as I just said earlier on, that's
I guess that's what I'm asking from this meeting, that we get the agreement that there will be a proper review of the situation and with better data, so that we can go forward and actually then speak to Dimensions on this issue. And that doesn't seem to be here today. Looking online, Dimensions also run Fountain House. How many other organisations within Bath and North East Somerset do Dimensions run, and can we have that information? Because it looks to me like we could be in this situation in next year, and we could find out that Fountain House will be shut down for all kinds of reasons. Again, I'm making that up. But what we don't know in this panel, and that's one of our jobs, is to check on that information, is where is Baines, what it is using, and where it is using it, and what kind of review it has and consultation it has with those users. Now, we're talking about the most vulnerable people in our community that have no voice, no expression, that rely on their families staying alive to take care of them. And when they have passed, what happens? And we have a whole group of people that we know nothing about, and that their families don't have any support for. So this is really important that we have a promise from the Cabinet member that a proper review of this situation will take forward from today.
Would it be helpful to, and I absolutely appreciate that this is not quite what you're asking for, Joanna, but if we had an item at our next panel that is looking at adult social care that is around respite, And that way we can look at the whole issue of respite, how much respite is being sought, how much is provided, and perhaps answer the questions in that way.
Yeah, I'm happy to give that assurance. That piece of work is underway. We're doing it. But also, I think since bringing the services back in-house, we now have a much clearer understanding of the needs of a lot of the individuals who are supported by our learning disability services. And we are looking to understand those more fully to enable us to plan for the future. So that work is happening. I can give you that assurance.
And I'm just giving you that heads up that I think we will be asking for a paper on respite care at the most appropriate meeting. Thank you.
Okay, my question is on 3.26 about occupational therapy. You say that there are 85 requests per month, and it seems interesting to me that I mean, this is an area that if you have an awful lot of staff working in occupational therapy, that you can save huge amounts of money. So what work is being done? One, I can see you've got people being trained up, but how are we reviewing, again, the occupational therapy situation within Baines?
I've got Anne Smith here with me, who's the Assistant Director of Operations, who oversees the occupational therapy. That you can see that since we've taken over the service in April, that we've seen a decrease in the amount of people waiting for occupational therapy. We've brought in apprenticeship OTs as well to work with, and we've also started to track with the NHS the work that we're doing about small pieces of equipment and the contract around that, and we're working with housing. So there's a lot of work going on around occupational therapy, bringing down the waiting list, making sure, because we see this as part of our prevention agenda, actually people who get occupational therapy involvement earlier in the process are less likely to need long-term care. And it's good for the individual and it's good for the budget as well. So there's quite a lot of work happening on that. And do you want to add to that?
Thank you. As it says in the report, we have invested in some occupational therapy apprenticeships. That was because we cannot, like many other local authorities in the country, recruit. There is a shortage in occupational therapy posts, and we are working with approach to different organisations. One is an organisation that does provide interim occupational therapists because we've been unsuccessful in going to agency staff and unsuccessful in recruitment, despite us being very competitive as a local authority in pay. So they are going to come in and work with us for a few short months just to help us clear more of that backlog as well. Particular demands are around DFGs and assessments in homes. And then there's already been a review that we're building on in terms of the pathways that people come through. So we are just putting some additional resource in our first response team to enable people to have access to and be signposted to those smaller aids and pieces of equipment so people aren't waiting as well. So that work is ongoing, and I should hope to see month on month, as we are doing, the occupational therapy waiting list coming down.
Working with the ICB, because I mean, one of the clear things that we know is that we don't want people stuck in beds in hospitals, but equally then we want them in their homes. And if we can get people in their homes, stay in their homes because their houses have been properly reviewed and they can move around in them better because they've had delivery of goods and services. And I know that this comes under Councillor Moss's scrutiny panel about how housing sits. Or was it, maybe it actually is going to be in the other one. I know that there's a piece of work going on with the housing team. So I guess, do you have enough finances, and is there enough work going on within the council to properly review this?
So the reablement service, which is provided to support people out of hospital or prevent people going into hospital, has its own OTs. They have complete access to all the aids and equipment that any of our OTs see. So we don't see delays or performance in Baines in terms of getting people out of hospital and back home with reablement is very good. So there is no delay from that perspective. As well, as I say, there has been a review undertaken by our commissioners with our housing colleagues as well to look at those pathways again, so that we understand the pathway through that DFG element. I think I've talked to scrutiny about that before as well. And as I say, and as part of that offer, we'll be looking at technology alongside our occupational therapists. So it's an ongoing piece of work for us.
And my next question is on 3.3, the commissioning update. You talk about commercial assurance. Can somebody explain what that means, please?
So I also have my Assistant Director of Commission who will talk a bit more about that, but just to say that one of the things that since the new staff have come in from HCRG is that we've identified that further work needs to be done with the sector around our commercial expertise and their commercial expertise. So driving up quality and driving down price is what we're really about, to try and get the best value for the £99 million that we have in adult social care. So that's what we're trying to do. We've appointed a number of staff into those commercial type posts who will work with the sector to make sure that we're getting best value and driving up the quality. So that's what it's about, really. But Natalia may want to add to that.
Natalia, could you also just say who you are when you speak? I think we need to have it so for the... Oh dear. Kurt, perhaps, I think one of the working speakers is coming your way. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm Natalia Waszkowska, Assistant Director for Commissioning. So what we have done in the new model, we have reorganized our commission resources to make sure we've got dedicated officers who are strengthening our relationships with the providers. We commission across hundreds of different organizations. Dimension is one of them. There are others. And it is challenging financially time nationally for adult social care. That's why the government introduced a commission for adult social care. You've seen those press releases about what the next step from policy and decision makers are. We do get financial allocation as a council from the government. Every penny we get for adult social care, we invest in the sector. And I think that is out there. So the MCIF, the Market Sustainability Investment Fund, you can see that published, our returns and where we have invested, including provisions for people with learning disabilities, for older people and others. But honestly, it's not enough, and I think that's why there is a national conversation. It's not enough for the providers, and it's not enough for the council. So we're doing the best with the resources we've got, and you've seen the budget and other plans. So having stronger technical focus in commissioning on negotiating when we procure services, on negotiating when we are making arrangements for individuals and their families is paramount. Other councils are doing the same. And the quality bit is around quality assurance, because every day members of my team are out there visiting services, talking to people who draw on care and support in Baines and their families, and as importantly, to frontline staff from care providers, because there is a workforce challenge as well. So those were the drivers for making very clear this is the strategic part of the commission where we look at long-term plans, but every day we're making sure that the services we commission are good quality and affordable.
Thank you. And on 3.65,
Joe, do you have, how many more questions do you have?
Got two more. I mean, it was a big paper and there was an awful lot on it. 3.65, remaining public health contracts. I guess looking at Becky Reynolds, that's a huge amount of work that seems to still be re-procurement of remaining public services underway. I mean, as a public health body, that we're responsible for public health, how are we making sure that these continue to function and the importance of that functioning?
Yeah, thank you for the question, Councillor. The large procurements that have taken a lot of time have been the ones that we've been focusing on now. So they're the ones that have happened and have either completed or are going through process. The remaining ones, as I've put in the paper, will largely be around procured under a direct award process, which is a much quicker and shorter process, which is why we have focused our time on those that we've had to go through the competitive process for, to make sure that we've given ourselves sufficient time for that. We're working very closely with the local medical committee, the local pharmaceutical committee, to make sure that, because as you say, these are essential services, some of them are delivering our statutory services as well as the local authority, to make sure that we will be able to continue those from the 1st of April. But we don't envisage them to be as long at all as the competitive process that we've gone through, by nature of the fact that they are expected to be direct award processes. Thank you.
Okay. And I also just want to make a political point about national insurance. I'm looking at the Labour group here. We clearly know that it's having a devastating effect on the charities and local government, and the ability to maintain services is causing severe problems. Will you please go back to national government and tell them?
Well, I don't think the Cabinet member has to answer that particular point, but thank you. So my next person who has questions is Leslie.
Thank you. Leslie Mansell, Radstock. Right, I want to pick up on Newton House. I have to say I'm absolutely shocked and horrified at the information we've been given today from members of the public. Within the report, it talks about January 2024, Dimensions identified that the service had become financially unviable. So when did we know at Baines that that was the case? I'm not sure that that came to this panel back in January 2024, but then I don't remember everything, but I think I would have noted that one. I do welcome, Chair, that you've said we'll have a report regarding respite at the next meeting. Can we have in that report updates on where these families are now in terms of getting their needs met? The other thing I wanted to raise was, if they are under capacity and we can't find space out of county, why isn't, if there is capacity, from out of county being brought in? I also would like to ask around promotion. We have a responsibility under the Care Act 2014 to promote. In Radstock, we have the second highest number of disabled people according to the census 2021, which may be higher now or lower, I'm not sure. So what advertising was done in Radstock about this service? Is everybody getting access to that information? Because if you look on Dimensions website, it's not overly clear on how you get access to the service. No matter what you click, you can't get the relevant information. And to pick up on Councillor Moss's point about Dimensions being a community interest company, they do say that any surplus they make is recycled back into the organisation. So how do we ensure that that is coming back into Newton House and not going elsewhere to shore up something else? I did ask a question around the equality impact assessment on this decision. Now, Dimensions may not have a responsibility under the Public Sector Equality Duty, but this council certainly does. So if we knew about this decision back in, or the change to service back in January 2024, why has an equality impact assessment not been conducted already? Because they should be carried out for any decision, any service, and there ought to be one on the service provision anyway, which I haven't seen. And it's a bit of a concern that national insurance may be a cost, but will the cost of paying for disability discrimination cases be higher than the national insurance costs? Thank you.
Thank you, Suzanne.
Thank you, Councillor, for the questions. As the report says, our commissioners became aware in January 2024 about the possible changes, and there was discussions going on around that time. We are happy to come back with an update, not on individuals, but on a list of the 17 cases that we're dealing with, and that we've completed the assessments, we've completed the reviews, and we've got a plan. Happy to do that, and I think that's what you're asking for. Around promoting advice and guidance for respite is part of our Care Act responsibilities, and not everybody can just have respite. They need a Care Act assessment, and they need to have a need for respite. So it might be that there's a general sense that, you know, more respite is required. We've got a lot of respite in place for older people. I think there's a lot of work to be done about working age adults since we've taken the service across, and that's why I'm really keen to take up the opportunity and the recommendation of a review. When it comes to the quality impact assessment, we will do a quality impact assessment as part of this, and that's why it's paused. And you are right, it is not the responsibility of Dimensions to do a quality impact assessment, it's the responsibility of the Council.
Thank you, Suzanne. Leslie, did you have more questions?
Can I just come back on the commissioning as well? Because if we are commissioning services, and it's been raised again this morning, can we have within that report on respite of how the procurement process works? I think this is very important that we understand it as members of the panel, so we can ask the right questions and we can make informed choices around that. As well as the public as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Leslie. I'm sure Mark will be making a note of that part of the request as well. Actually, yes, I think you wanted to raise a point for information, so I'll allow that as long as it doesn't become a question.
It's just for information. I'm a member of the Constitution Working Group, which is just as exciting as it sounds, but one of the things we're looking at is changing the Constitution to reflect new rules on procurement. One element we'll be looking at is the Keep It Local campaigns that are happening up and down the country to make sure that procurement can actually ensure that money stays within local economies rather than going to international, multinational companies where the money will disappear from the local economy. So just for information, that is something that's being discussed, and I hope that we can have a conversation about that, about how Baines's procurement policy takes account of that.
Thank you, that was very useful. Liz?
I promise you, Suzanne, this is the very last time I'm going to mention Newton House, but in the report, it actually mentioned, and Leslie has referred to this, that Dimension said back in January 2024 that they were going to change the use of Newton House. Did you know about it then?
In January 24, I did not know about it, but that wouldn't be right that I would know about that, because if it's within policy and it's within the financial envelope, it might not always come up to my level. But what we've now put in place, so this does not happen again, is that we have a lead member briefing every month, and we've got a section in there about any changes happening, so that both the lead member and myself are aware of what's happening, because the commissioners were working within policy, within budget, and they often do work like that with providers, but the impact was really great for the people who are using the service. So we put other measures in place to be assured, both Councillor Bourne and myself.
Thank you. I now would like to ask about commissioning, and 3.3, the commissioning update, it's totally new. We've had you explain what it is. What does it replace? And is there any way that it could be confused with our community wellbeing? I mean, is there an overlap between the two?
So I think what we've done, and I'm happy to provide the briefing to the panel separately, if that would be helpful. We have brought 5 teams together into one team and reorganized skills and resources, and that's the model which is summarized. There is more information available. So it's about looking for single strategy, more effective use of the skills and expertise we have, and having flexibility to respond to national and local pressures. So it's going from 5 teams to 1 and strengthening the elements of the model as described in the briefing.
Thank you. I think that would be very helpful for us all to have that.
And on the second part of the question, Community Wellbeing Hub is a partnership, and as part of that partnership, we're also commissioning some of the partners of the Community Wellbeing Hub to deliver services on behalf of the Council. So it's not a commissioning entity. We are investing in the hub, and we are commissioning direct support for Baines residents through the hub, but these are 2 separate entities.
Just another question on 3.5 Community Partners Update. Becky Brooks has mentioned that there needs to be better communication, and that's what we're working at between 3SG and Baines. But and she mentioned about the timeline, but there are no next stages on the timeline as to what is happening. So £802,000 should have been cut over 2 years. No cuts were made last year. So where are we now with the implementation of these cuts?
Thank you for your question. So part of the procurement will be to start shortly. We will be with the providers, and we are expecting to do this within this month, to be able to give an overall procurement time frame for how we're going to manage the service. There has been an agreement already with some providers that Natalia has worked with who wanted to come out of the market. So actually that's given us some savings naturally anyway. It's over a 2-year period, and I've used some funding that I've had directly from the Department of Health to help us to manage this through the 2-year period. So when I come back to panel, which I think will be March, we will be able to share with you the timetable. But first, we're working with the community partners towards the end of this month.
Just double checking that you haven't any more questions. No? Okay. Then I've got Ruth, and then David, Kevin, and then Leslie. So Ruth is next.
Oops. Thank you for the report. I've got a couple of smaller questions, perhaps, and then a comment. First question it refers to the adult social care service update, paragraph 3.2.5 about reviews, and my question is, how frequently are they carried out? So that was one of the questions. And the other question was to do with public health nursing services, paragraph 3.6.2. And in that I was wanting to know, let me just find it again, it's about the appointment. There will be also named health visitors for families with children up to the age of 4, and a named school nurse for each secondary school. So I was just wondering, what's the situation with primary schools? Those are the 2 questions. And then going back to Newton House, more of a comment really, thinking about the future. I'd be very interested in to know more about how we plan for respite care looking to the future, because things change all the time, and listening to the descriptions of how things are from the members of the public here was very moving. But I'm also aware that we're all getting older, so at some point the people who are now looking after their children may not be in a position to carry on doing so, and what options are there for them then, and more generally how there may be perhaps 17p service users, to use the term, who use Newton House at the moment, but over time that will change, obviously. So I think the idea of some sort of, if it's possible, as Wendy suggested, some kind of flexible use of the facility would be, if it's possible, would be good. So, you know, for short-term and long-term respite care. So to use the space, the facilities as well as possible. And just as a sort of another thought that occurs to me, which is not so relevant here, but it's also a similar situation, for example, in schools, you know, where the number of pupils fluctuates over time, and then some schools then expand, and then is happening, you know, now they're realising they have more classrooms than they actually can fill, and so what do they do with the space that's left? And until, you know, everything changes in a few years' time, that they'll need them all again. So, yeah, so sort of more flexibility in the planning about how, you know, is also important to consider, I think. Anyway, so I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. So, first of all, the reviews. We generally, compared to other councils, are doing well in reviews. But you've heard earlier on about an experience one of the families had about not having a review since 2017. And there are areas that we've got to do more work on around reviews. Somebody should have a review at least annually. Some people have 3, 4, 5 reviews a year just because their needs change and they need a review, and we need to do consider an extended package or a decreased package. So yeah, there's more work to be done in reviews, and it's a piece of work around our transformation agenda that we're doing since we brought the service back. You'll never get 100% reviews. Never. I've never been in a council where you've had 100% reviews, because, you know, there's turnover all of the time. But we would want to get much more into the 90s, and in particular for people with learning disabilities and complex needs, to have that regular focus. And I think we'll bring that back when we talk about the respite care as well, and the importance of reviews and doing them at least annually, because that's the expectation of us. So that was reviews, and the other area was around respite. As I said earlier, that's an opportunity we have now to be able to review and look at the needs analysis, what's coming through for younger people, working age adults, and older people, and to make sure that we are managing the demand and we've got the right service to do that. So that is our next steps. And finally, I didn't feel like I answered the question around commissioning as well as I could have. One of the biggest focuses around commissioning is start well. And you know that there's a number of providers, I'm not talking about Baines now, nationally, who are for-profit organisations. And one of the focuses around the commercial activity that we're doing is to be able to work with those providers to make sure that we're getting the right care and support for those young people, as well as within the right cost. So that was the other driver for the change that we made.
Okay, Ruth. Something to that, sorry. Just picking up on the point you made about service users with elderly parents and planning for those. I know that's something that I've discussed with Anne and with other staff in her service recently, that we're aware that that's something that we really need to have on our radar, and we need to be reviewing those and planning, because otherwise we could end up in a position where suddenly, you know, that person's care just goes overnight. Because the parents become ill or whatever. So that's definitely something that we're looking at.
Ruth. Yeah, thank you very much for your answers. But going back to the primary schools and the, do you have a can you answer that question now? Sorry,
Becky's looking like she can. Ruth.
All right, thank you.
Yes, thank you. Just to say there's a slightly different model in primary schools, so there'll be a small group of school nurses who have responsibility for providing support and input into a small group of primary schools, so that they cover them and ensure that there's cover if people aren't around, just because there's so many more primary schools. So they're still able to develop the relationship within the schools with teachers, but then it's a smaller group of nurses supporting a cluster of primary schools. Thank you.
Thank you. So on my list, I have David, Kevin, and Leslie. I think that's everybody. Okay. Right. David. Thank you. Okay. I apologise then for missing your moment. Kevin.
Sorry. Thank you, Chair. Chair, I have some questions around the social care update, and then just a couple of questions for Becky as well, please. So if I can start with the social care update first. Under 3.2.1 and the general performance, which appears good, great, thank you. Just wondered how these measures would compare pre you taking over the service and how those have improved. It would have been nice to have seen which areas are still where they are and what have improved, what maybe need more focus on. And on that similar thing, last time when you introduced the change to us of taking on staff into Baines, in-house, you did mention that having talked to staff, one of the key things to make the service or improve the service was around decision-making and flexibility, because HCRG was quicker, if you like, in terms of response and less paperwork and less demands when making decisions, and it was cost-effective. And so how may that have improved? At 3.2.7 around mental health teams, there's an alarming increase in the requests for under 16s. And are there particular circumstances around those cases, and is this a trend? And if so, what things are being put in place? At 3.2.7, again, sort of related to mental health referrals, there is about 20% of those referrals not accepted for a full assessment, and what happens to those people. And the final bit around social care was 3.5 and the community partners update, please. I'm assuming from the paper, and please clarify for me if I've got this totally wrong, it seems to be that you're at a stage where you've decided what services you want now to commission. So you've gone through things and said, right, these are the things that we want to commission now. Have you now left off things from that list that you now currently commission? And if so, have you gone through that process that you were talking about, which was analysing the effect of dropping that service and the knock-on effects later on down the line, and whether that's going to increase or decrease? So that's the social care ones, please.
Okay, I want to do my best here. I'll need help from my team as well. So our improved performance, we can say what the performance looked from last year to this year. The biggest improvement has been around reablement, and the quality of the reablement around 91 days, less people going back into hospital, about 91 days. Where we've got more work to do compared to the previous year has been around direct payments. And we've talked a bit about direct payments earlier on this morning, but we have more work to do around direct payments and our offer around direct payments and the uptake of direct payments. So they're the two biggest areas really since then. One of the other things was around the staff that moved from HCRG to the council. We've offered them in the last 4 weeks to join our terms and conditions, so it's out for consultation. So many of the staff, 80 of the staff wrote to us and they said, we really want to come onto the council terms and conditions. Not of all of us do, but the majority of us do. So we're now about to go into consultation with that offer. So that's another bit of good news that I didn't say earlier on. I would say if the staff were here, the new staff that come across into the council, they struggle with some of the bureaucracy we have in the council still. I think it's fair to say that because we're a bigger organisation and HCRG was quite a flat organisation, we have more assurance in place, and sometimes they have struggled with that, and that's been the feedback I've had from the staff. Around mental health, I think Anne's going to talk a little bit about that. But we have seen consistently, and it's through children's and adult services, an increase in mental health post-COVID. And it's not just a blip. We're doing more mental health act assessments. We've got more people coming through, and organisations like Mind, who make the biggest impact for many of those people, and supporting their emotional and mental health well-being is really important when we're thinking about the community services work we're doing with the partners. We have set out our commissioning intentions, and they're very much related to what's expected of us through the Care Act. And we're doing a piece of work now just to make sure there's no gaps, because that's one of our biggest fears, and I'm sure Becky Brooks would agree with this, is that we don't let people fall through the gaps. So we're doing we've got a risk analysis that we're working through at the moment, and the partners have told us that's one of their biggest concerns, that we'll go out, we'll procure something, and we'll miss some of the important smaller groups, charitable groups that we're not actually funding at the moment, but actually they're making a big difference to the overall system. Yeah.
If I just answer the mental health question. So the approved mental health team, so the practitioners for that service do sit in adult social care, but they work all age. The youngest person that we've worked with, unfortunately, in the last few weeks is 11, up to the age of any age. There is that increase, as you've rightly pointed to. There isn't one, I suppose, single sort of presentation around those young people, but there are some common themes. So one of the things that the Community Safety Partnership Board has agreed to do is to fund a thematic review, particularly around it's mainly young women who we're seeing, and it's mainly some of those adverse impacts that those young women experience that are impacting on their mental health. In terms of the 20% who are not detained under the Mental Health Act, so people may or may not be aware that that needs a mental health practitioner, which is ours, but also a doctor's recommendation, so that's the route for detention. They are referred off into other services and supported by other services, including things like our recovery teams that sit with AWP or primary care liaison teams, as well, so they're not assessed, not detained, and then left. There isn't an outward pathway for those individuals.
Chair, can I just come back on one point before I go to the public health? You mentioned, obviously, and I can obviously understand your concern about the fear of missing something on the services when you come to the new procurement. When you've sort of said this is what we're going to have, so have all the third sector people gone through what you've said now and said, well, actually, you are missing this, you are missing whatever?
No, not yet, and I think that's the next piece of work that we're doing, 28th of January. That's the next stage that we're going to get to, because we've had that discussion. And we've identified the areas we think are gaps, but we really need to go back with the partners and just check it out again, because you very easily miss some of the charitable sections when you're not funding them yourself directly. So that's why 3SG is so important, because they've got the overview of the charitable sector would be members. That's a piece of work we need to do before we get to the next stage.
Thank you. And for Becky, bless you, on public health, I was going to ask the question about, so if secondaries are named, where's the primary named person? Even though I do appreciate you'd be working in teams, but obviously from a purely past experience, having a named person is always good in those teams. It doesn't have to necessarily mean that person is taking it on. But I just wondered on that point about public health and schools, now there's the new MAT construction in Baines, which is most of our schools. Is there a different way of working school nursing and the multi-academy trusts, bearing in mind they would cover certain secondaries, feeder schools and aid communications and everything else between different things? The other point I'm going to make is around the 3.6.4, the wellness service. Didn't quite understand what Everyone Health Limited work was going to do, what he had changed from, and how it's going to understand and respond to needs of local communities. I thought it might be in terms of weight management, but I wasn't sure who it was talking to and how it was responding at all. And your last bit on 3.7.3, this might not be you, it might be back to social care, sorry, but it was the 2 care homes that are currently requires improvement. Just when are they due to be re-inspected, and if so, have the identified actions to secure good been completed?
Lovely, thank you. Thank you for those questions. In relation to different ways of working with the MATs, that's a really good question. I don't have a detailed response to that, so I can ask for that level of detail if that's helpful and feed that back to you, because it's a really valuable question. There is a school standards board that all the MATs are represented on, and periodically Public Health attends that. That's very different to specifically how does the Public Health Nursing Service work through the MAT, as opposed to individual schools, so I'll get back to you on that. In relation to the wellness service and some of the difference between what was provided previously and what will be provided in the new contract, we're wanting to make some of the work that we do, or some of the work that Everyone Health does, much more co-developed, which is where some of the community engagement and some of the community work happens. Previously, we have always offered individual weight management interventions, so we've offered Slimming World vouchers, for example, for people who have wanted to lose weight. That hasn't always been a particularly effective use of money, so we're trying to take a much more of a whole systems co-development piece of work by working specifically in local areas with communities to look at what would most help local people in that area manage their weight more effectively. In that way, trying to link a little bit more with mental well-being, for example, and some of the other issues that people may face in their life. It's a different way of working, and more wellness services across the country are moving away from paying for individual weight management, Slimming World type vouchers, to taking much more of a co-development with local people in local communities, recognising that so much impacts on people's health, not just the availability of a voucher. So that's one of the changes. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the question on our 2 care homes and our 5 extra care units. 5 extra care units are good. The 2 care homes requires improvement, and I've got the Assistant Director who has overall responsibility for the services. What I would say is there's a very robust improvement plan in place. One of our biggest issues when the service transferred was the use of agency. We've seen the use of agency drop by practically close to 90%. That means recruitment is good and retention is much better. We're on a journey to continue to improve that, but I'm going to pass over to Claire Thorogood, who is the lead for the regulated services.
Thank you, Councillor, for your question. Just to reiterate Suzanne's comments, we have a continuous improvement plan, and Suzanne has full oversight of that plan that we report to our governance and assurance monitoring meeting that we hold on a 6-monthly basis. In order to ensure that we contain momentum with our improvement, we did invite in, back in the autumn period, as cited in the report, Care for Quality. They undertook an unannounced visit into each of those CRCs. We will be continuing with those unannounced visits to maintain that improvement progress, and that gives us real vigour and robustness that the actions that have been identified for us, we continue to walk towards them, and most importantly, they are demonstrable. Overall, we are making good progress. I do think we are due CQC because it's been over 2 years since those provider services were inspected. So in the meantime, we continue with that momentum and the robustness around those action plans, and I oversee them on a weekly basis with the head of service and the registered managers.
And just to say, I've had a note here that our 2 supported living services and our shared lives are all good, registered by CQC. And I mustn't forget that, so thank you.
Thank you. And just to say, I haven't reached the exalted status of councillor yet. No, that's fine. But also, on the unannounced visits, are staff working with you on those and they don't feel them as a threat? Because I'm sure that I've been in situations where unannounced inspections are probably more harmful than helpful.
Apologies, I got the wrong button. Absolutely. We take this as part of our sort of inspection preparation and being prepared all the time, and Anne Smith and I work closely together around that. Of course, part of our inspection preparation is making sure that staff feel supported by the process also. Of course, we can never fully prepare, a bit like this scenario is that you don't know what questions you're going to be asked on the day, but we do make sure, as much as they are unannounced, as it is that balance between the robustness of replicating what an inspection would feel like with a regulatory body against making sure that staff feel part of the process and engaged wholly. So for that reason alone, what Anne and I have done over the last 3 months is implement an improvement working group where it's not just the head of service leading the action plan, we are doing that full engagement with the registered managers, those deputy managers also join the group, and the monitoring assurance visits with Suzanne, so as everybody feels part of that improvement journey.
Thank you for your input as well, Claire. Okay, turning back to my list, I think I've got just Leslie. Leslie.
Thank you, Chair. So the other week it was my nephew's 40th birthday. When he was at school, his mother, my sister, had to go through hell and high water to get support for him because he's dyslexic. So hearing Gillian's information today about the sort of process she's had to go through to get support for her child is shocking again. So can we have a report on what the process is to get the reasonable adjustments for people at school and the right support that they need, and what are the timescales on it? Moving on from that, 3.2.7 around mental health. It says in the report that there's an increase, a 50% increase of requests for under 16s to be detained under the Mental Health Act. And we know the link between food insecurity, education and schools and mental health. So what interventions are we looking at there to try and bring those numbers down? On the commissioning overall, I mean, we do have to recognise that Baines has brought a lot of services back in-house, and I think Suzanne's already mentioned today, the commissioning task is becoming bigger alongside procurement because we're dealing more and more with private companies rather than local authorities. But it's also been mentioned there's 5 teams. So who are the 5 teams involved in the commissioning? And also, if you look at the equality impact assessment mentioned at the end of this report, 7.1, it says there that there's no known adverse impact. They also don't say whether there's any positive impact, which is a bit of a worry. And if you look at the impact assessments for, the equality impact assessments for adult social care commissioning, you'll see under each of the protected characteristics, it says not applicable. So that's also a bit of a worry. For me, I'd see that as being poor and potentially institutionally discriminating. So can you explain those as well? Thank you.
Thank you. Suzanne, are you going to pick up those questions?
I'm going to try. Around the mental health, Anna's going to come in on that one. Commissioning and the 5 teams, I'm going to ask Natalia to come in. And I think, Councillor, you're talking about the quality impact assessments in the second paper, is that right, around the budget? Is that what you're talking about? Because there's no quality impact assessment.
Well, there's 2, Suzanne. So there's one with regarding to adult care, and then there's 2 with regard to the budget, and it's the second 2 which say that it's not applicable on the protected characteristics, but the first one says there's no adverse impact and doesn't say whether there's a positive impact, which ought to be a worry.
Okay, so let's take the mental health one first, Anne, and then...
Sorry, I think So as previously stated, we are doing a piece of work across with our children's colleagues to look at...
Sorry, Anne, I don't think we can hear you very well.
Sorry.
Suzanne, if you take your microphone off as well. Suzanne?
Oh, sorry. Sorry. That's better. As I've stated, we are doing a piece of work jointly with our children's colleagues and with the Community Safety Partnership Board to try and understand some of the pathways into those assessments for mental health as well. So that report and that analysis will be taking place over the next few months.
Natalia, around the 5 teams, clarity around the 5 teams, as well as the quality impact assessment.
So I offered a briefing I can provide more information and a briefing on how the commissioning arrangements were prior to 1st of November and how they are now, but basically there was a team working to put in place services for children and young people, and officers who were arranging individual placements were based in that team. So that was one team. There was a second team working on plans and services for adults of working age, a third team who was looking at older people. There was also a team doing contract management and ensuring that the services we have commissioned from third parties are of good quality and affordable. And the 5th team, it's called a brokerage team, where for all the adults, not for children, they are every day making sure that when social workers and occupational therapists have done an assessment of needs and agreed a plan with an individual, that those services are directly sourced from the providers with whom we have contracts. So what we've done is we brought those 5 teams into one and reallocated functions, and that's what I described earlier.
Thank you, Natalia, and I think it would be very helpful for us all if we had that briefing paper to accompany the minutes of this meeting, so thank you for that. Okay, is that all the questions asked of this? Okay, bearing in mind, I was going to go for everybody a 5-minute comfort break, Joe.
I just want to follow up from the first public speaker and what Leslie Mansell said, and what I said at the time was that we had in the Community Wellbeing Hub update was that, I mean, one of the big issues is that parents have children and then they don't know where to go to. So one of the whole things was about signposting and how do we work better with families to get them signposted. And although that we're clearly hearing within Baines there are services, lots of people don't even know how to get to those services. So there seems to be a piece of work there that we're missing in this stage. And I'm just trying to work, how do we do that? And then also, and I am missing Councillor Crosley being here, he would always say, you know, this is an agenda paper for noting. Do we actually need to put some recommendations in it that we want, you know? We have a clear issue today with Newton House, where when did we hear from Dimensions, and what did they know, and when did they let people know about this? So should we be actually putting something into this paper, asking for a bit more than just to note everything that's been said today? Thank you.
Okay, so we have also asked for a number of additional papers to come from this, which I think is part of the action that's
but should we actually have that as something that we vote on today, and that is a recommendation from this paper?
Sorry, could you clarify exactly what it is you want to be a recommendation? Because from what I've taken from
We had various papers produced, and our recommendation is that we have these various papers put forward for people to make sure that the public aren't going to come back again and say, you listened to us a while ago on these serious issues and we're still in the same place. So it's how do we make sure that there is action taken forward rather than we're just noting this paper.
So for clarification, we're not merely noting this paper. We have already asked for a number of papers to come forward. I don't think we need to vote on it unless anybody has any, reason to object to that. So I don't see that we need to do so because those papers will come forward and I think it will be in which meeting? April? The April meeting. And so we'll have, those papers that will give us that better understanding about the respite, for example, that is being offered across our
I just
area.
hope that then those are in our minutes. Thank you.
Alison.
Can I just say that my understanding is that the SEND information is on the Live Wellbeing's website. And also, I was at the Wellbeing Hub on Friday, and Paul May was there as well. And one of the things we were discussing is the fact that they are doing a lot more with children and young people services now than they did when they were first set up. So they are expanding to work a lot more with organisations that support children and young people. So I think we are working towards having a much more comprehensive offer and much more easily accessible offer through that work.
A bit of pushback. I think it's come up previously, though. Having the Live Wellbeing's website doesn't necessarily mean that people know that it exists. So I think that's part of the you know, maybe that's an area that we might want to explore in the future. Becky.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Chair. We have this conversation a lot, and I, as part of 3SG, I work quite closely with the Community Wellbeing Hub. We're looking at better ways in which we can get the message out about so the Council has a statutory duty through Live Well to provide that information service, but we're looking at ways in which we can also enhance that offer as well. And when we were at the Community Wellbeing Hub on Friday, we were talking about a tool that they are developing. They're using AI, which will actually have conversations with people with trained information. And it's also going to be really exciting in ways in which it will keep conversations. You can kind of go off on a tangent that steers you back to the original question. Is quite clever, and also gives people the opportunity, if English isn't their first language, as well for support. So I think that support offer will be strengthened in the coming months, hopefully.
Thank you, Becky. And I think this panel would be very interested to have some more briefing on that. That sounds very interesting and very answers quite a lot of the questions that we've asked over the last year, at least. So I think we've asked all of our questions. So thank you, everybody, for your attendance for that part of the agenda. So the meeting is not over. But I was going to have an opportunity, maybe for 4 or 5 minutes, for people to have a comfort break if they want, and if members of the public wish to leave at this stage as well, then I'm more than happy for them to do so. So thank you. going to restart the meeting, and the next item is item number 7, which is our update from the Baines Swindon Wiltshire Integrated Care Board. So we will have had the papers already. Is there anything else you wanted to add, Laura? Or is Paul helping you with this paper as well?
Nothing specifically to add, Chair. We'll assume the paper is read, and just minded of time, if people have questions, obviously very happy to answer those. In addition to the paper, you've also had circulated some slides around the Health Inequalities initiative. We had intended to present some of the headlines of that to you today, but again, I think in the interest of time, we're very happy to answer any questions. If it's helpful, Chair, I can quickly frame the content of those slides just to help the panel navigate. So the slides that you have are around the Health Inequalities Investment, which was funding that came from NHS England. It was delegated through the Integrated Care Board, and it was ring-fenced for prevention, and particularly around health inequalities. The ICB delegated through its Population Health Management Board that this money should be spent through localities. And in Baines, we had 2 tranches of funding. And on slide 5, you'll see that we have invested in a health inequalities network to ensure that we have the infrastructure there embedded to make sure that health inequalities is everyone's business. So that was actually funding some resource in the council to have a coordinator of health inequalities, also in primary care and also in our acutes, and also around the community wellbeing hub, which we've spoken about a bit today in terms of outreach. And then in addition to that, there were 12 projects that were funded, totalling some £357,000. They were targeted at core 20+5 inequality metrics. So that was a range of projects around adults, children, young people, and inequality priority areas on a geographical basis. I should say it was an extremely popular initiative. We had over 40 projects that were submitted, and clearly it was oversubscribed on that basis. But as we heard from Becky Brooks and others today, we have a thriving third sector, and we had some amazing initiatives that we have delivered. The slide deck gives you just a headline around how those initiatives have been getting on. Full evaluation is not ready yet because not all of that has concluded, but we are very happy to bring perhaps an update to your June panel, Chair, if that would suit panel members and yourself. So I'll leave it there, Chair, and pass back to you in case there are any questions from the panel.
Thank you very much, Laura. And so the panel is aware, I think Laura and Paul need to leave by 12:30, so if you can make your questions relatively succinct, I think that would be appreciated. Liz, you can go first.
Just a very quick one. It's about the measles vaccinations. I just wondered what efforts have been made to engage the take-up of those who are already disadvantaged in their communities, so inequality isn't further compounded. Thanks.
Yeah, in the report we give an update around the vaccinations around children and young people, because I think that was a question that was asked last time. We also spoke last time around the outreach and inreach that we're doing around our vaccination programme. Over the Christmas period, we worked very closely with public health colleagues, for example, to be targeting where there may be a lower uptake of some of our vaccinations, and in particular around the flu, and I think it had been identified around some of our care homes and domiciliary workers was one cohort that we wanted to look at, and also geographically just making sure that we have got those vaccination clinics open and available and widely advertised. I think, as you can see in our report this time and last time, Baines typically do better than the national average, but clearly we want to be still getting those numbers up as high as we possibly can.
Thank you. So I have Kevin and then Leslie on my list.
Thank you, Chair. Laura, the 4 quick things. When you did an answer around pharmacies, I think, an email, is it possible just to clarify how you're assessing that? On what basis is the needs assessed. Does that make sense? You say you do certain needs assessments in particular areas every so often, and there is no apparent need in Baines, but it'd be useful to know what the criteria are that they're saying we're okay, please. The second thing around flu vaccinations, good news about the children. Although we hear on the news a lot about hospitals being inundated with cases of flu, is there anything that's being reflected upon where it's adult groups need to be more widespread in terms of vaccination or whatever? Is there something happening there? The third one is around, talk about, as we're coming sort of about budgets, you did mention a couple of meetings ago around the ICB inherited a deficit budget, and has that issue been sorted out now, or is that still hanging over you in terms of services and options you can offer? And finally, I can only apologise for this because I wasn't able to make the November meeting when you may have done a lot of information on this, but I had a few questions around the PINS project. Can I just email those to you for next time to include? Would that be okay? Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Kevin. And Laura, I don't know if you wanted to respond to...
Yes, thank you for those questions. In response to the pharmacy question, yeah, we sent an email around because I think the issue was slightly more complex and there was more detail to be contained in that email. The needs assessment that we refer to is an annual needs assessment that's undertaken each year. That is also seen by the Health and Wellbeing Board and done through public health colleagues. So my understanding is that next assessment is due, and we will know more when we see the outcome of that assessment. But the previous assessment is the basis upon which we understand that there were no gaps in provision and that we were meeting statutory requirement. I could work with public health colleagues, if helpful, to have a look at, it's called PNA, and I can't remember what it stands for now. Pharmaceutical Needs Assessment, sorry, to talk in acronyms. We can have a look at the criteria to see exactly what it is that they assess and how that generates what it does, if that would be helpful. And I think there's a report coming to the Health and Wellbeing Board in due course, which of course the panel will see, because obviously the panel get those reports as well, and we can make sure we flag that, Chair, through Mark and colleagues, if that would be helpful. In terms of flu, we are slightly down on the vaccinations that we gave last year compared with this year. However, we still are, as I was saying, above the national average. I think it is widely known and widely reported in the press that this year's flu has been particularly, a difficult and nasty strain of flu, and indeed has coincided with other respiratory illnesses, which, including COVID and others, which is increasing pressure and demand, particularly through presentations in our EDs. So I think it's fair to say that that has caused significant problems, as we've heard through the news and also as I've reported here, particularly with our flow. So actually being able to manage that level of demand through our acute hospitals and obviously make sure that we're managing the flow out of our acute hospitals. So our system has been under increasing pressure. We have been in rising escalations as a result of it, and we have had to put in additional measures and call additional escalation calls. And again, over Christmas, just to say thank you to public health colleagues who worked very closely with us, making sure that we were getting key information out, particularly to care homes targeted, but also to residents and communities, just about keeping people well and making sure that we were clear what the routes of access were for people seeking guidance and support to relieve the pressure on our services. And then, yeah, in terms of PINS, it's an amazing project, and of course, please do contact offline, and we'd be happy to bring an update on that back to panel anytime.
Thank you, Laura. And just to remind everybody on the panel that the Health and Wellbeing Board meeting is open to the public. I don't believe it's webcast, so if you're interested in hearing sort of first-hand, then you could attend it if you wish to. Right, on my list is Leslie and then David.
Yeah, thank you for your report, Laura. We don't have the minutes from the last meeting, but there were a couple of things that I was down to ask. One was around the pharmacy provision, and I did write to you and you have passed that on, so thank you for that one. And the other one was around physiotherapy and data and people who were complaining. Now, I have contacted them but they are very concerned that if they stand up and be counted, that they probably won't get a service, so I really can't get them to come forward, unfortunately. But they have been waiting more than the, I presume, averages from the last report, which is more than the 15 weeks you've got down there. But I wanted to ask around, you said that in this report it talks about the waiting list in December are on target for recovery. Can you explain what that means? Because I don't know what it means. Surely it would be patients' recovery rather than the targets. So obviously improved targets would be better. And with the quality impact assessment, so again you provided us with the harm review process, which looks fantastic. It's reported on every 3 years, so when can we see the latest report on that? And just to reiterate that whereas the HCRG may not be responsible for carrying out the quality impact assessment, then the North East Somerset Council does. So we probably need to look at that and make sure that we have one that is of good quality. With regards to the name for the new mental health service, it's now going to be Kingfisher. We already have Swallows in Radstock, which is a provision for disabled people. Is this going to be confusing, or are we just going down a bird's theme? And emergency at the RUH, I mean, we've seen over the weekend, unfortunately, a nurse stabbed, and I see in our hospital we have increasing figures around violence and aggression towards staff and other patients as well sometimes. So what provision have we got in there to safeguard our staff at the RUH? And what are the waiting times at the moment? Because again, I hear from colleagues who are in the ambulance service and Unite the Union, where I'm also a member, that they are just so frustrated because they're sitting outside emergency departments and can't get the patients in. Thank you.
Thank you for those questions, Councillor.
Sorry, Leslie, can you turn your microphone off because I can't hear Laura very well?
Sorry, is that working? Yeah, I'll try and take those in turn, and it may be that we need to come back with some of the more detailed information. So on the physiotherapy, and when we refer to recovery, what we mean by that is that we were not on target with that service, and so we had a recovery plan in place. You may recall Val Grace from HCRG outlining that last time, and we had that plan in place to get back on track. So the recovery to target means that we're getting back on track. Sorry, I can realise that language is confusing if taken out of context. So December figures tell us that we're back on track with that. In terms of the harm review process, I will take that away and see when we can find the latest report and if we can provide that to you. In terms of the new mental health service, I'm pleased to say that the name was actually arrived at with those with lived experience. So actually that was done in collaboration with service users, families and carers. And I think we have looked at, it could be confusing looking at other services that have got similar names, but I think on balance it was felt that, you know, with the appropriate communications and given that this was meaningful and had been done in conjunction with service users, that that was the name that had been chosen and should be taken forward. And then in terms of the pressures in EDs, I guess, safeguarding, I can certainly ask RUH to provide us assurance on their safeguarding policies, and clearly the incident that you refer to, as I understand it, was not local to us, albeit very harrowing, but just to clarify, I don't think that that was a local incident this weekend. So we can certainly provide assurances on what we have in place in our local hospitals. And again, in terms of waiting times for ambulances, there are very robust procedures in place for when ambulances are either waiting up 4, 6, or if they breach 8 hours. And that was the escalation process that I referred to earlier. So we do have monitoring on that daily. and we do have escalation calls that follow any breaches and wait times with our ambulances, and we're working very closely with our colleagues in SWAST to see, who are the South West Ambulance Service, to see what we can do to assist, and that is why we have the system calls that are called across system for our acutes, our community partners, our local authority, our mental health providers and our ambulance service. So there are daily touchpoint calls in place.
Thank you. And just picking up one of the points that Leslie made around complaints, I don't think we've had Health Watch present a report this year so far, so then maybe we could put that on our agenda, because I think they also cover complaints as well. And maybe we could also invite the ambulance service to a future meeting. Sorry, just to butt in there. David, and then Joanna, and then Ruth.
Thank you for your report, Laura. I note the time and you've got to go, so I will submit, if I may, written question to you on exactly what the emergency department at RUH working better than expected actually means. Thanks.
Thank you, David. And Joanna?
Too many bits of things. Hello, thank you for your report. On the measles and the 95% need for herd immunity, how do we reach that 5.3%? And is it an issue around homeschooling and access to data on who we know who has it and who doesn't have it?
I will have to ask my vaccination colleagues if they can give clarity on that, Councillor Wright, so I will take that question back and bring that back for you.
On the issue of flu and it being a major problem, a family member tried to have the flu vaccination before Christmas and there were none available. So again, going back to vaccinations, is there actually sufficient vaccinations available within the community so that they can get the flu jab?
Again, I'm happy to ask our vaccination team for clarity on that. Obviously, we have seen in the press that there have been instances where there aren't flu vaccinations available. I haven't heard directly that that is a local issue, but certainly we can have a look at that and come back to you.
It is in Lambridge. There weren't any vaccinations available.
Okay, we'll have a look at that.
And it would be useful to know where are the problems within Bath and North East Somerset on that. On your slide deck, slide 20 of 21, it says the local plan is informed by community engagement work with seldom heard groups. It's really good to hear those seldom heard groups are being listened to, and then again it was hearing the public speakers today, there's a whole lot of people that don't get heard. So who are those local groups that are being heard, and do we have more information about them?
Thanks for the question. It's a really important question. It's something that our Health and Qualities Manager is working on with different groups. So one of the main groups at the moment is the Trevor and White Way Network and others in that area, but trying to explore, rather than inviting people into our meetings, which doesn't always feel helpful or the right kind of forum for that, what's the best way to do that, but without also then repeating. We're really conscious, lots of people want to talk to people, and it can be quite annoying concept if people are always coming to talk and people can't see enough action happening as a consequence. So there's a number of different forums or groups who are trying to do that kind of thing at the moment, and so Sarah is trying to work in partnership with them and look at the best ways to understand what people's perceptions are of local issues or barriers, just like the reasons you were just saying, you know, if people can't access things like immunisations, what is getting in the way? Is it a practical thing? Is it, which side is it on and where now? So that's kind of what's going on. And if we do come back in our year's worth of the projects that have just happened, our monitoring for that will happen in April, and we'll have a full report kind of in May or June. So we could perhaps touch a bit more on where we've got to with trying to build better engagement with local communities.
Could we actually have some data about who those seldom heard groups are? Sure. Because it just sounds like you're doing something very positive. My experience of being a councillor is that most of the community I speak to say they've never spoken to anybody and they get infuriated when they read something like that. So I think there needs to be a bit more honesty in that conversation.
Thank you.
Yeah, we can link in with Sophie Broadfield and colleagues on the local plan work and just get clarity on who the seldom heard groups are with that engagement framework.
Thank you, and thank you for your answer, Paul Scott, who I believe is the Associate Director for Public Health.
Apologies, I didn't introduce myself. And yes, sorry, also thanks to Laura for noting that one is more about the local plan work, so it's a slightly different line of work. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. And can I just add to that piece of work on flu vaccinations, would it be possible to include other barriers to people taking up flu, particularly maybe around cost as well? So Ruth, I think you have the honour of being our last questioner.
Right, thanks. So there's very short, quick questions. About the Kingfisher, I was just interested to know whereabouts in Bristol it is, because it will be serving all of our area. And when in 2025 is it due to be finished? It said the building started May last year. So those are two short questions. And the other one was just an observation, really. You talk about the emergency department. Is this the... previously we always kind of referred to the accident and emergency. Is this the new kind of naming of it? Is there a trend away? Just thinking, for example, in the police force, they no longer talk about road safety and they don't refer to accidents, they refer to collisions or maybe incidents. Is there something similar going on here in the NHS, that you've dropped the accident part of the name? Thank you.
No, not deliberately. I'm sorry. I obviously just referred to that in shorthand, so I apologise. No. In terms of the Kingfisher, so the location will be at Blackberry Hill. There was a requirement when we were looking at shortlisting of locations that it had to be co-located with certain criteria, and so there was a limited number of locations that were available, and we were very fortunate that Blackberry Hill was suitable. It is due to be finished and operational within the autumn of this year. There had been some delays, and some of those were due to planning delays, and some of them were due to some of the things that were found on site. In particular, archaeological issues arose, which were unforeseen, but I'm pleased to say that despite all of that, it is broadly still coming back and on track. So I think we have committed to this panel before to come and give an update, not just on the progress with the new unit, but actually more broadly, some of the exciting things that the new unit will be able to offer and how it fits with the overall end-to-end pathway. So I think we are looking at when we can programme that in on your forward plans. So we'll be guided by you as to when might be appropriate to bring that one back as well.
Thank you, Laura, and thank you, Paul, and thank you everyone for your questions. And I think that means that you're only a couple of minutes late for whatever your next thing was. Right, we now move on to item 9, which is the budget. So these are budget proposals in adult and children's services. I think we've got a bit of a tag team. Actually, where's Paul gone? There he is. Going on here. So I'm going to ask Alison and Paul May to kick this off. I don't know which of you was going first. Apparently Mandy's going to go first with her support.
Thank you, Dina. I'm just going to give a couple of minutes introduction, if that's okay. What you've got before you is you're actually the first scrutiny panel to consider the elements of the budget that are out for consultation for 25-26. And as Councillor Moss said earlier, the budget proposals which are relevant to each scrutiny panel will go through that process over the next fortnight, and then there will be a second corporate scrutiny panel meeting to consider the overall responses. We are currently out to consultation, as in broader public consultation at the moment, and there is a link at the end of the report to the public consultation document, which does contain details on all the growth items which are attached as appendices attached to this report, and the proposed saving items that are out for draft at the moment. So if people do want to see the individual quality impact assessments associated with each of those items, they can be accessed via the link at the end of the report. The Council will not hear the final settlement whilst, from Government until February. However, obviously we have had some initial indication the week before Christmas, and the papers reflect that as well. I'm just going to draw your attention to a couple of sections in the report. Section 3.2, the first table talks about the required growth that is assessed at the moment into the budget this year, which is around 27 million. And we think at the moment we're going to get a funding increase of around 13 million. So as you can see, the savings have been proposed to deliver the gap in the budget between those two items, which was around just over 14 million, which will give the Council a net operating budget of £148 million next year. Section 3 just gives you a little bit more detail on the material savings and income generation and growth items relevant to this panel. Obviously, we've got a range of officers here who can support the Cabinet member with any detailed questions around any of those items as well. So thank you, Chair. That's all I was going to say by way of introduction.
Thank you very much. So, who's going first then? Councillor May or Councillor Bourne?
I'll go first. Yes, I mean, as everybody knows, public finances are tight, they're difficult. We've been living with austerity for a long time, and councils have really borne the brunt of a lot of that and have had to demonstrate efficiencies year on year, and this year is no different to that. From an adult social care perspective, our budgets are managed well, and that's all the more impressive, I think, given that we cannot foresee what the demand will be each year. So, things happen. Suddenly, we are expected to pay significant amounts for people who've got high levels of need, and we've got a statutory obligation to do that. So it is really challenging, and I don't think anyone should underestimate that. In the budget setting, we have got some new funding to account for inflation, pay inflation, and for demographic growth and various other things. And we also have some savings to make, and those are savings that were generated from Suzanne and her team, and they're things that they feel they can be achieved and we can still continue to meet our statutory obligations. So I think that's the sort of the overview of it. We are expecting to break even this year, and then obviously from April we're into a new financial year, and this is the backdrop that we're working with.
Thank you, Alison. And now Councillor May.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's true to say it's been a very, very difficult period of time with regards to children's services and budgets. We've had demographic growth of children and young people, increased numbers, complexity and the cost of care in the marketplace. And I think, generally speaking, regionally and nationally, it's accepted that the system is broken. With the new government, I think there was ambitions and expectations that they might actually be addressing some of these issues. But at the moment, I don't think it's actually come through the way that perhaps we might be hoping, bearing in mind there's a black hole around SEND funding nationally. So the budgets that we put forward are quite clearly reflecting the demand issues that we've been talking about, including the very sensitive issue around home-to-school transport, which is set down by legislation, which has been subject to, I think, exceptional growth in terms of costs. So what I've been doing is working with the Cabinet Member for Resources and the officers on a 2-weekly basis, looking at our expenditure in great detail, including looking to make sure that the element of cost around health is actually picked up by health. And I see Laura's gone now, so I'm not playing a silly game on that, but the simple fact is, when a child comes into care, some of the issues around mental health, etc., are health related, and we do need to make sure that we're getting the correct costs. So the budgets that are put forward are quite clearly about picking up the additional costs, but at the same time it's a large service, it's second to adult services. So we're actually then looking to see how we can actually reduce those costs moving forward. And it's the sort of issues like reunification, i.e. Getting the children back to families, the edge of care issues that we can talk to and try and use family placements. So there's a whole range of things that we've actually built in there. And one of the high costs that we've picked up, like many other local authorities, has been residential care, where that's out of, I was going to say out of county, that's an old term, out of area. And we're looking to see whether we can actually pull those services back in to the area with running our own children's homes, if we can actually get those set up within the medium term fairly quickly. So I think the long-term issue is it's a great pressure for this council. We saw at the cabinet meeting, last cabinet meeting, where it was picked up that it was going to cost us an extra £5.5 million, and those pressures are not actually reducing, they're actually increasing. Over the Christmas period we had a lot of increases. So there is a great pressure, I think, on children's services. And there's no point us saying, you know, we can wave a magic wand. This affects every other service that is in the council, and it's a difficult time for the officers. Great pressure, and I'm looking around the room. You know, the pressures are enormous, and it is important for us actually to be honest about that in the figures that we've been providing. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, so panel, so starting again with Liz.
I'm in a very privileged position here. What I would say is I think we all understand the pressures we're under in making this budget balanced. But I'm concerned there aren't many new ideas in the proposals other than in children's services. So with your permission, Chair, if I can talk about the adult services first, followed by children's, or if you want me to stop after adults and let somebody else have a go. And
whole speech.
Do my whole, right, thank you. There are two areas I just want to concentrate on, and one is adult social care commissioning, and this is to be achieved through maximising the use of the Better Care Fund and improved Better Care Fund to protect social care expenditure. This is going to be achieved through savings of £750,000. Yet last year, there was a proposal to review and improve Better Care Fund with an enhanced allocation process whilst protecting social care, and this was with a savings of £200,000. So my question is, so how successful was last year's expenditure? Has it had little impact as the cuts have increased this year by £550,000? So how successful do we think this is going to be? The second area, and it's very similar, is the review of adult care packages. This year, the proposal is to cut these by almost £1 million, 900,000. Yet last year, the proposal for these care packages was 270,000. And again, how successful was it last year? How do you think you're going to achieve this target this year? And how successful do you think you're going to be? To add to this, we're looking at last year's budget. Halfway through, there was a gap, I'm told, of 5.4 million. So, you know, it looks like we're not achieving the targets that we want to achieve. And also, a new provider, HCRG, will be providing many of the services starting day one, March 31st, 2025. How confident are we that they're going to provide these services within budget? And then, if we're looking at children's services, firstly, I welcome the proposal for early help, and I'm assuming it is to provide more SEND staff, especially in addressing the backlog for EHCPSs. But regarding reunification, which is a great idea, it's already in place. The proposal to save £1,400,000 in the first year seems incredibly ambitious. The reports on this which we've had in corporate parents show the numbers to be fairly small, very successful, but fairly small. And so what are you basing these figures on, given that the number of children coming into care is increasing? Home to school transport, Paul, you've mentioned a new proposal saving 600,000 as a result of investment in internal provision. The Labour Group actually put this forward last year, but there are questions to ask. Are you confident there are available drivers for this? And what does the plan include? Will it be buses, taxis, a bit of both? Do we know the cost per person to and from educational establishments to be able to predict the overall reduction? Paul, you mentioned something like this. You mentioned there should be a review every so often of this cost. So I think that's a really good idea to helping to find out exactly, what the costs are and whether you're going to achieve the 600,000 reduction. And once again, a similar proposal to last year, specialist commissioning savings. Last year the proposal was for 500,000. This year it's 923,000. Achieving these savings will be through reducing reliance on high-cost placements, especially out-of-area provision. Now, this is a really tricky one to achieve, I think. How successful was this last year, and what evidence have you that this will be achievable? So, they're my questions.
Councillor's statement.
Shall I answer the adult service ones first? Will that make sense?
Yes, please.
Okay, so just to put it in context, Cabinet have agreed an extra 5.9 million into adult social care. That's with growth and inflation. And that's really important to note because of the national insurance issue. So that's really important to note, and we're really pleased about that. So to talk about, I noticed you say no new ideas, and I noticed that. And bear with us this year because we've just brought the services back. We've had a CQC inspection. It's the whole lot has really focused my management team on the work they need to do. And I do agree with you, Councillor, that we could probably work harder, be more transformational in the work that we do over the next year, but I don't want to overpromise, and I want to deliver. We delivered this year our savings. So I can assure you, as I sit here, 2024, all our savings have been delivered. We have tracked them with an inch of our lives to make sure that we deliver, and trying to make sure at the same time the quality of service is not affected and that the people aren't affected by this. So we've achieved all that for this year, so that's important to note. For next year, the BCF, the IBCF, we took 200 out last year and 750 for next year. We will deliver on that, and we will make sure that the work we're doing with community partners as well will not be affected by that. Now, the big challenge for us is the 900k. That is a big challenge for us because that's the biggest amount we've ever done. And I talked earlier on about the pressures the budget is under around growth in mental health. We talked about respite, growth in older people, and growth in learning disabilities. So the money that we received from Cabinet has been fantastic. That will help us with that, but we will really have to make sure that we're Care Act compliant and that all our reviews, we're doing all our reviews to make sure where people need more care, they get it, and where they don't, that we're able to make some of our savings. So we've done it before. I'm confident we can do it again, but actually those pressures around national insurance and things like that really make it much harder. So you have less capacity in the budget to be flexible around the savings.
Many thanks indeed, and I admire your confidence, and I hope this is going to be the same situation next year. Is it allowable for me to ask where this money is coming from the Cabinet? Would it be from reserves?
Who's going to answer that question? You mean the 6 million, the 5.9 million? Yeah. Some of that comes through from the support we've got from the national government as well. But Mandy?
This will be core funding, not from reserves. Both the growth items and obviously the savings are against the core revenue budget.
Councillor May.
I'll try and answer the children's queries, which is quite a long list. I'll start off by you mentioned early help. Can I leave that to the last? Because that is an area which I think the committee know that I've had some reservations about for a long time. But the issue around reunification, this is looking at where you're having growth at the bottom end. At the other end of the system, you hope that there's children going to be coming out of the system. So that is something that we're actually doing in great detail to identify how we can actually reduce costs if there's those, we work with families to actually get children back into families, and obviously some of them actually then become older and they move into the adult services system. So I think that is something that we've been working at in great detail, and Mary can provide further information on that. The other issue there was around the home-to-school transport. I think what we're trying to do there is, because the price of taxis have gone up so much, we're looking, and we've already started to implement getting more in-house delivery, working with children to actually do that ourselves, rather than having to go out to taxis all the time. And Mandy can give a bit more information on that in a minute. And the other issue around the early help, that was in the medium-term financial plan, was £300,000 this year and 150 next year and 150 the year after that. These, at a time when the Labour government is saying about putting greater emphasis on early help, is an issue that is, I think, a worry for me as the Cabinet member and for everybody in this chamber about how we actually do that to have the minimum effect. And Becky can probably answer any detailed questions on that moving forward. But that's a review that's being undertaken at the moment to actually make those implementations. But if the long-term cost of those are going to increase, then quite clearly the commitment's been given by the Cabinet member that if that is the case, then we will have to rethink about a particular budget. And I think that's great credit to the Liberal Democrat Council that we actually do see that risk in that saving that has been asked for us to achieve. Did that answer all your queries?
But I think Mandy's going to come in and add a little bit more about the home-to-school transport. Reunification, Paul, I don't think you've really reassured me about that. It's an awful lot of money. Maybe Mary can come in on that as well. Thank you.
It's appropriate from those two questions that we'll do Mandy and Mary. Thank you.
Shall I do home to school first? Would that be helpful? So you asked several questions, particularly about driver recruitment as well. And the whole point of us employing our own is so that we can actually manage that market better. And I'll be quite honest, it is a market intervention. We've just had a piece of work completed by an external body through a contact of the Chief Executive Officer. It's actually, they've done it for free. So we've got some initial information that I think would be good to feed back to this panel at some point. And what that does say, the headlines of some of that, is that we've got good average rates, we've got good utilisation. We always knew we were an outlier with single taxi journeys. And that is because we haven't got, and we've heard today about provision for for adults, but actually it's for younger children as well, and that has been picked up. So our focus is on those very expensive single taxi journeys. In answer to your question, yes, we have extremely comprehensive, robust data. So I could sit here and probably bore you to tears with every supplier, of every cost, of every young person, of where we transport and how. So we have got good data to inform our decisions. The other two areas where a slight outlier below is we haven't got as much personal transport budget take-up or personal budget take-up, but the biggest cost is around those single taxi journeys, which is in driving our costs. So if we can intervene in that market, and then have more of a position. But there is some work also to do with a couple of our taxi firms as well, to talk to them about their rates as well.
Thank you very much for that. So can we work out the average cost per pupil, rather, of transport? Because that would be a very useful piece of work when we're looking at the budget for it.
We can tell you it for a type, so we've got a hierarchy, so we know that the big coaches, for example, the cost is lower to the taxi journey, and we can provide that information to the panel.
That's great. And then a final question on that, if that's okay, Chair. It's we also thought about the Labour Group about a personal budget plan for parents, but you're saying that you've actually tried that.
Yeah, we're always trying. That is our hierarchy. The first thing we offer parents is, could we give you a personal budget? So when people talk to parents and families, but for some of the reasons we've heard today, that's not always suitable, because sometimes families have got other children that they've got to get to school, for example. So we do start, but we've recently reviewed our home to school policy with parents as well. And so that has been changed as well, but that has been developed with parents. But we would always start by offering those options.
You need your microphone on, Mary?
Can you hear me? Oh, there we go. Thank you. Can I also, just similar to Suzanne has said, in terms of the growth that has gone in, I really appreciate that the challenges across children's services in terms of the budget, but that the growth that's gone in around both demographic as well as inflation is really, really welcomed. Specifically in relation to reunification, we have managed to embed reunification really, really well across the local authority. We've managed to change our practice so that at the point a child comes into care, we're automatically thinking about reunification at that point, not just at a later point in that journey. And we're one of the first local authorities that have appointed a systemic family therapist to help us with that, so that we've got that therapeutic support to the parents in terms of that reunification. And our Connecting Families team also work with the young people. So it is a whole system approach around the reunification. To date, we've reunified 12. And in terms of identifying the numbers, we've carefully considered and identified those young people, and we know who they are in terms of the next calendar year and in terms of them being reunited. So we're quite comfortable that we can achieve that target. This year we achieved the target that we had set to do that. So that's a really, really positive. And we've got a conference coming up in the next couple of months just around reunification as well. So it's a really positive development. And I guess alongside that, we received some funding from the Department of Education this year about embedding family links. So that's about creating the opportunity for young people who may have lost connections with some of their connected carers or family members, so we can explore any family member or a non-family member if that's the connected person that young person wants to be reunited with. So we believe from a practice point of view it's really positive, and certainly we've had feedback from our young people who've been reunited that that's been really helpful. Does that answer your question?
I hope your confidence will be rewarded. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you, Liz. I'm sure Mary would like to turn her microphone off now. Or possibly. Shall I have a go?
It's having a funny moment.
Lovely. Okay, because I only wanted to add, obviously, one of the questions you asked, or one of the points you touched on, was around early help, and this panel has already agreed that we will do a piece of work around early help, and I think we've got the start of that process will be in March, and obviously we'll have a conversation within the panel at that time as well on that. So, turning back to my list, I have Joanna.
Just trying to look for my questions. Thank you for the report. Mandy, what does the changes to national insurance cost us in this next budget year?
Off the top of my head, Jo, I don't know what the increase is across the whole of the council. I do know that the initial settlement, it were getting slightly less than we thought we were going to do as well. I don't know, Liz, if you've got that to hand, but if not, I can find out for you.
But the changes to national insurance, you don't know how much that is going to cost the council?
We do know how much it is, but I haven't got that figure to hand.
Roughly, are we talking 1 million, 10 million, or roughly?
Can't remember. Can you list what the figure is? No. I'll have to get it to you, Jo.
Could that be sent to the whole of the...
Yes, of course I can, yeah.
I think that's a really important point to look at. Going back to the reunification and that piece of work that's being done on the children's budget, really useful to hear what you have to say about that. What are the numbers that you're projecting to reunify next year then?
Can you hear me? Yeah. We're projecting to reunify 12 next year, and that's a combination of step down from residential as well as perhaps from foster IFAs down into family homes as well. So it's a combination of both.
I guess the wider question is, why hasn't that done before?
So we introduced the reunification framework just over 2 years ago in Baines. We worked with the NSPCC at that point to establish a framework. We hadn't had it established before that. So we had children returning unplanned, whereas what we want to do is to do that in a planned way and wrap the support around so that it's successful. So it's been further embedded.
Talking about the connection with the family member that we have in the council, as you know, we are all corporate parents. We had that as an item agenda in a corporate parent meeting. And one of the things I was surprised by was just how few connective family members were actually made amongst the number of young people that we are responsible for. So how could that be increased?
So what we've been quite successful, and perhaps we've not shared the level of detail here, is that we've got quite a lot of children who are actually supported within their special guardianship or other networks that we don't report those in terms of the corporate parents because they don't actually come into care. And we've got quite a number of children who are now supported through our Fostering Families programme. So that's the programme that works with children on a child protection plan or children perhaps going through pre-proceedings where we are looking at other family members to support those children without them coming into care at all. And certainly we could take a report through to a future panel to give some update on that, because that has been very successful. Because what we're trying to do always is how can we best support the vulnerabilities within a broader family network without those children coming into care at all. That's always our first aspiration.
I guess the wider question, and for both adult and children, is that, I mean, everybody talks about there's a lot of confidence that you will make these savings. But how will you measure those savings for the young people and the adults who are being looked after, cared for in whatever way that money is being spent on them, or now not being spent on them because you're making major savings? So it just seems to the average person looking at this information that there's a huge amount of money being spent and then you're saving it. So if you could have, why did you have to spend it in the first place?
I think it's a really good question, and I think there's a number of factors within that. So what we're always trying to do, or what we always must ensure we're doing, is that we're discharging the statutory responsibilities of the local authority, both in terms of Section 17, so that's within the community, and we work incredibly hard across children's services to ensure that we only bring into care those children that either the birth family or connected carers can't safely meet those needs. So we operate a stringent legal panel, a stringent care and resource panel, where we scrutinise all of those decisions, because we should only ever take into care for the absolute reasons for the shortest period possible. So as a service, we work really, really hard to do that. I'm really pleased to say that from a practice perspective, we've been subject to 4 inspections in the last couple of months from Ofsted and CQC. Our focus visit around care leavers is being published today, and it's really positive around the quality of practice. So we're always trying to manage ensuring high quality services, good decision making, but equally how can we remodel and how can we reduce our cost base. We're obviously working very closely with commissioning colleagues in terms of the commissioner review that's happened and that move to that team to really look at how they can broker and reduce some of the cost of packages, because it is the cost of the packages that's really challenging for us. So that's work that we're continuing to do with our commissioning colleagues. But we're always balancing, making sure we're making the right decisions, the safe decisions, and quality practice.
But again, going back to the people it impacts the most, how do we know? I mean, we clearly heard a story today of furlough where the family members had to pay for the services themselves. How do we know that a lot of people aren't just putting their hands in their pocket and having to pay for services, whereas what's happened is that the council are making reductions, but the impact is on people and them now having to find that money themselves? How do we even find that out unless people come here and tell us?
We have got in the paper is a request for growth around SEND. We know that there are real challenges around our timescales, and I know there was a member of the community spoke earlier. That is an area we know that our performance is not where we want it to be, and our response around the timescales is not where we want it to be. So I'm really pleased that we've been able to put in some growth that will help us with that, to have more manageable caseloads so that we can provide that better support.
The question.
Can I try and answer for adult social care, your question for adult social care? So the first thing is we're different from children's services in that way, is that the service is new to us, and I believe we have more opportunity in that. As Mary has said, children's service is particularly good, the quality, and CQC and Ofsted has rated that already. And it's harder in some ways for children's services that I feel we've got more of an opportunity because of the service coming in and to increase our reviews as well, and to make sure that people have the right size package that they require. The other work that Mary and I are doing jointly, which is different from previous years, is around transition and making sure that those young people that come from children's services to adult services, that they have the right package of care. And it's a different legal system between children and adults, so there's different responsibilities. So those two things are really helping us to, to understand the quality of the service. And the third thing is, yearly we do a quality survey or quality of experience, and that's where we often pick up some of the issues around people being dissatisfied or they're not happy with their service. And that's a random sample of about 2,000 people that we check with. So that's another way of doing it. And of course, scrutiny today was more than helpful to help us understand some of the stuff we need to do about respites. So it's layers. It's like an onion. There's layers of different ways of understanding what's going on in the community.
Councillor May.
Can I just add a couple of things? You asked about the NI costs. Of course, the other issue, if you get a direct answer from the finance people around Baines, it also knocks on in terms of the voluntary sector and our contractors who work for Baines. And under those circumstances, you may not get the full cost in that response. So I think we do need to just, I doubt whether we'd ever be able to actually give that specific answer around our contracts. The contractors are tied with contracts, but if they've got an increase around their NI costs, we're protected for a while, but then you're in the situation when those are recontracted, the prices will go up. So it's not going to be a straightforward answer that I'm afraid you're going to get. The other one around I was just going to mention that last week the Chief Social Worker of the Department for Education came down to meet us, because part of what we're doing at the moment is looking to develop up foster carers who aren't foster families but foster carers who work with families that are perhaps able to take a child back into reunification, back into the family, so that they then can provide respite for those families. And because we're under such pressure, we've been looking at any new ideas. And the fact that the DFE have come down and actually said that they will actually look at this, and they were really impressed with what they were hearing. The big question was, in my mind and in their mind, is that's an additional cost around foster care, but is that actually then stopping children or getting children out of the system back to families safely? And they've agreed that they will be working with us to evaluate that more effectively in the future. So I think that's another example of what we're trying to do to actually get children back into family surroundings that are safe, and it's got to be that it's safe. And that's another example that I thought was there.
Thank you, Paul. Alison, I didn't know if you were indicating you wanted to speak.
I think Suzanne covered it. Thank you.
So, are there any other questions on this paper? Kevin and then Leslie.
Thank you, Chair. On the under adult social services budget bit about the provider services income and opportunities, is there a danger that you might be pricing yourself out of the market, or is it just getting yourself back to where maybe other people are? A bit about technology-enabled care, is the savings net of any investment in things like AI and things, or has that already been made somewhere else? And on the children's side of things, I just wondered if there had been discussions with multi-academy trusts in terms of I know a lot of multi-academy trusts have duplicated maybe some services that now are going into the SEND and AP service that Baines are running, and whether there is buy-in in terms of getting together in terms of saving the total DSG money by all coming to some sort of common mind. And the last wasn't really a question, but just a comment that, excuse me, under the budget setting principles on page 32, it was discussed here, but whether it should be in the principles about no service would be cut if additional costs were then going to be made down the line. Thank you.
I was going to answer the AI question, and I was going to answer the income question. So we are really excited in adult social care, and I know in children's as well. We've just started a pilot on Magic Notes, and that's part of our technology where that will really help our staff and our frontline practitioners in particular for it to streamline the work they do and improve the quality of the recording as well. So we're really excited about our piloting that. We've just started as a council doing some work around Copilot, and that's another system that we're using, and I've been using it over the weekend, and it did something like I wanted to respond to one of you about a question, and I said, please respond to Kevin Burnett about this, and it just wrote the email for me. So it's been fantastic, some of the work that I can do. I asked it to write a report for me, could it help me with workforce and research. It took, I suppose, 30 seconds. So there's some great stuff happening across the council and for our frontline practitioners as well, which will really positively affect the residents that we serve. So that's where we're coming. We're not putting an investment in there at the moment as adult social care. From a council point of view, that's a further discussion that Mandy might want to answer. And then I'm just going to go over to Anne around income.
Thank you. So on the income and opportunities, so where we have our in-house provider services, those that sit with Clare, which are care homes, extra care, and then day services and others, we have a number of people who attend those who are funded from other local authorities or have continuing healthcare funding. We remodelled the costs of those to look at what the actual cost of delivery is. So the intention is to write and inform those individuals that the costs will then go to a level that is the actual. So we're not looking to make any profit. We wouldn't do that as a local authority, but what we've found is that we're not actually charging people the actual cost of delivering those services.
Yes, sorry, I wasn't sure whether it was Mary or Paul who wanted to speak, because Mary's got a light on and Paul's got his hand up.
I'll go first. Mary will deal with the DSG issue, but the issue there is there's a limit to how much money that the schools can actually agree for us to take, and that's done through a proper process So I'm not quite certain how that question will be answered by Mary, but I was just going to make mention of the fact that the DFE are thinking about and working around a whole range of things, and we're hoping as time goes on we're going to get a bit more information about how we can cut costs down the line. But one thing that I have done is I've spoken to the regional lead who deals with multi-academy trusts and school funding, and I've asked her if she would come along and present to this committee, and only on Friday I had confirmation back that she would. So I think we'll get that into the forward programme if we can, Chair, because I think it's important. We've had that lady before, I think probably a couple of years ago, and it'd be really good to see what the current thinking is, because there is now talk about maths being subject to Ofsted inspection, because there are worries that we've all had, I think, for a long time, has been around how do maths relate to schools. The work we've done with SENCOs in schools affects directly the number of children that are coming into our system. So there's a whole range of issues which I think are relevant to this committee and, in fact, of course, to us. And I think it's nice that she agreed quite openly to say, yes, she'll come along and talk to the committee. And it'd probably be a good idea, perhaps, to get the questions in advance so that we can make sure you get the answers to the level of detail that quite obviously will be required.
Well, thank you very much for preempting a request from this panel. Mary.
Yeah, and if I could just add then in terms of working with the maths, so obviously through the School Standards Board we work very closely with all the chief execs of the maths, and in terms of the delivery of the elements of the safety valve plan, in terms of those 5 areas, both in terms of increasing mainstream inclusion, the SEND and AP advisory service, and the work to develop the residential. So that's all been done in conjunction with the maths. In terms of, Councillor May has already referenced in terms of the funding that comes through is subject to schools forum and a review of how that funding is allocated. But we are in conversations with the DFE Regions Group and the MATS around whether they could fund the support of the School Standards Board that the local authority has been supporting for some time. And that is under consideration, which is very positive. But we would absolutely always look not to have any double funding. If the MATS were able to fund any services, and of course the local authority, we would not be funding. Thank you.
Thank you. Kevin.
Sorry, Chair, can I also just do one cheeky question at the end, which is just...
How cheeky is it?
Oh, just very small cheeky,
okay.
Hopefully. Just to ask whether any of the savings that you have under the Children's Services are tied in any way to the safety valve, or whether the safety valve is a separate issue to this particular budget setting.
Yeah, I can confirm the safety valve is separate to this, Kevin. The savings are around children's services, but not linked to the DSG funding pot. Thank you.
Well, Kevin, that cheeky question was my question, so I will now move swiftly on to Leslie.
Okay, I think Councillor Harden has picked up some very important points regarding the budget, and Councillor Moss raised earlier on doesn't seem to have been much change since last year, which is a bit of a concern. But it's interesting to hear some of the things, the initiatives around the home to school transport and the reunifications. I mean, my question is, how is this going to be done? You've given some explanation. I would like to hear a bit more about ensuring that the accessibility is still met, and look forward to hearing reports in the future around the impact and the achievements on that. And if we go to page 34, the usual number 7 is the Equality Impact Assessment. It's not on this report at all for the budget, but as I said in the last report discussion, if you look at the adult care and commissioning, the Equality Impact Assessment has said for every one of the protected characteristics, it said not applicable. So can somebody explain to me why it's not applicable, and where is the equality impact assessment for the whole of the budget, and what consultation has been carried out on it? Thank you.
So who's going to go first on answering some of that? Okay, Mandy, I'm going to choose you.
Thank you. So, as I highlighted at the start, each individual item has an equality impact assessment. All our proposals are sent through to the Council's Equality Officer, who undertakes that overall assessment as well. So we have a corporate overview through our qualities officer, who sits in the resources side of the directorates as well. So she is looking about those composite impacts as well, which I think is what Councillor Mansell's question is. At the moment, we're out to consultation, so things could change. And obviously the important point is that consultation doesn't close to the 20th of January. And like any good consultation, it could well be we make some changes as a result of the feedback from the panels and what we hear from our communities as well. So once that work is undertaken, we will know what the final proposals are to put on the table that will go through the relevant political forum. And at that stage, I'm sure that our Qualities Officer will be looking at that and looking at the overall budget impact as well.
Thank you. Can I just come back? I think that's really good that the Equality Officer's got an oversight of these. However, it's not her responsibility entirely. It's the head of the council's got the overall responsibility, as set out in the law. So I would be concerned that we have equality impact assessments that say on them, not applicable, not applicable, not applicable. So we'll take this up further, because I'm very concerned, because I think we're at risk. And we are at risk of people taking out cases which would cost us far more, as I said before. Never mind the national insurance increase, this cost a fortune. Disability discrimination is not defensible in your law?
Councillor May.
Chair, can I just, I welcome Councillor Mansell's comments. We're learning all the time, and I've had a working session with her, and I'm going to be following that up with the Council's head of HR, so that we can actually make sure that we actually develop the system as time goes on. And I very much welcome her expertise in this particular subject, so that we can actually improve as we go along.
Mandy, did you want to address the point that Leslie was making around the ultimate responsibility?
Absolutely, and obviously we have experts in their field, and they will advise the senior managers up to the head of paid service on what their views are, but as you said, ultimately that needs to come through the appropriate management chain. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to clarify that.
Thank you. Okay, I'm not seeing any more hands that have gone up, so I'll take the opportunity now just to quickly raise one more point before we move on to the next item, which was around AI. And I just wanted to be certain or assured that our AI will talk to our partners' AI and everybody else's AI, because one of the veins of my life over the many years of being a councillor is our systems don't talk to their systems.
I don't know that I have the complete answers to that. I can say we have a fantastic head of IT who's come from health, and he's constantly looking around about those connections. And my understanding, and I'm not an expert on this, my understanding is that everything that we do, we're thinking about how that will impact on the resident as a whole, whether they use health or social care or the community partners. So we've always got an eye out for that. But I do think that it is a struggle about sharing data, and we do worry about it, and making sure that people have signed up to their information being shared as well. We've got to be really mindful of that. So there's lots of security in place. So it's not always straightforward.
I think we know that. Okay. Right. Okay. So our last item now is the panel's work plan. So we've had a number of items that have come up through our discussion today, which I will just very quickly recap, hopefully. So we're having the Regional Director to come to talk to us about maths, and I assume any new rules or changes that have arisen with the new government. We've got the items, as I said, well, I didn't actually say, but I expect you knew, that are on our work plan already. I think we're still expecting the CQC inspection report, so that should come when that's in the public arena. So hopefully that will be by the next meeting. What else was on my list? So we're going to have a briefing paper on the changes in commissioning, a Health Watch report, which will pick up the points around complaints, and a respite care paper. Have I missed anything, or is there anything that has sprung to mind? Liz?
You did say that there would be an update on the free school meal auto registration, that we'll be keeping an eye on that?
Yes, well,
some time ago.
Well remembered, thank you. Joanna and then Ruth.
On the child sexual exploitation / modern slavery, I mean, one of the biggest issues is online sexual exploitation of young people and generally people of all ages. I just wonder, is there more that we should be doing? I mean, it's very easy to talk about this in terms of local people and the issues that might affect somebody locally, but there's very little done. We're talking about AI, yet we're failing to address the fact that 50% of use of the internet is pornography, and yet that is one of the major problems for people of any age at the moment. We've had the Pellico case in France of women being drugged and abused and raped, etc. And yet we don't seem to be looking at that issue in any kind of a way on how that might be affecting people within our own community. We have no knowledge, and we don't even seem to be asking the questions about what questions we should be asking. And I would imagine that this is a major issue across the board, but within our own community. And I don't know how we address that within this scrutiny panel.
Perhaps it's partly because we've got CSE, child sexual exploitation, but we don't have anything about maybe adult sexual exploitation, and slavery, I guess, is part of that. So perhaps that can be picked up when we put together the elements for that paper. But also, I think the point you make around online is very relevant, and we need to find a way of addressing that. So again, maybe through safeguarding, if that is part of what could come forward.
Government just published their online safety strategic.
Literally just now.
Last few weeks we will work through that and then think about how we can play locally.
So Kerry's just pointing me to the draft statement of strategic priorities for online safety that government has just published. So we can pick that up at that point as well. On my list, I had Ruth and then Leslie.
Yeah, thank you. We did talk about it before, but I can't see it yet on the list of upcoming topics. But to have a bit more detail about home education, because we know that the numbers of children being educated out of school has increased quite a lot, especially since COVID times, and also I think it ties also in with increased number of health issues among young people, because that is often, I think, often the reason why parents decide to remove their children from mainstream schools, because they don't feel they're getting the support there that they need, in some cases anyway. So that it all kind of links in, and I think it's important that we have a better understanding of how families are being supported when they do decide to take their children out of mainstream schools. For example, I understood previously that they normally would only expect an annual visit from a social worker in the education team, and especially for younger children, I don't think that's adequate if you consider how children develop over the space of a year. So I think, but just generally, I would welcome that if we could have some more detailed information about numbers and how people are supported when they decide to home educate.
Sorry, yes, I remembered seeing something about elective home education. So we had some links that were sent out at the middle part of December. So it might be worth looking at that, but we can certainly have a further discussion on the back of that. Yeah. Okay, I've got Kevin and then Paul May. Sorry, Leslie. Sorry. I apologise. I think I may have just missed Leslie out, so I'm going to put you back and take Leslie.
Thank you. So item 6, although it's not numbered, you have to put your own numbers in. This is Attainment Gap Project Update, St John's Foundation. When are we going to be able to see that? And also, the previous discussion and, in fact, information from Mrs Taylor around the process she'd had to go through to get reasonable adjustments for both her children in school. Can we have a look at the process and the timescales and impact of that, please, on a future report?
Thank you. Well, as you will remember, I think last month we had a report on EHCPs. I think this would be a useful follow-up at our next meeting. Kevin and then Paul.
Yes, thank you. The schools' health and wellbeing survey outcomes, hopefully we can see something around those. And the other two things may be just for leader member reports. One was around any new government priorities for adults and children's services, and the work being done by public health in links, things that can improve attainment and health for children, but not in the school setting, factors around the outside, whether there's a timeline on how that might come through to see what the outcomes might be.
Thank you, Kevin. And Paul May.
Just to make sure we don't lose the fact that there was reference to home to school transport, you'd like a further report on that, and also the question around early help, that we would be coming back with a report on that, because that's important, I think, not only for the committee but for me as the cabinet member. On the attainment gap, I suggest we link that into the visit from the DFE, because I think it's really important that we actually do look at the total picture rather than just the School Standards Board or the work that's being done really effectively. Because we did have a report back to the Health and Wellbeing Board from St John's about that work, but it didn't come to this committee, so I think there is some sense in us actually having that discussion back here within that home attainment gap project. I think that was everything. I'm just picking up from the discussions that have taken place, Chair.
Thank you very much. Yes, I think that would be very relevant to have that attainment gap, the work of St John's, alongside the regional director.
I also forgot, we reported we've had 2 inspections, one of the youth justice system and one of the school care leavers. One was done by HMIP, probation, and the other was by Ofsted. Those reports will be coming out soon, and it would be appropriate, of course, for us to be reporting them. Whether it's good, bad or indifferent, it's important that the committee has the opportunity to scrutinise what we're doing.
Absolutely, yes. And I think we made a note about the home to school transport piece as well, because the policy, I think, came out, about a year ago. So actually looking at the impact of that, I think would be very helpful. Okay. Anything, Ruth, one more thing.
Just a question. Please, could you tell me when the next meeting will be of the Health and Wellbeing Board?
I will turn to one of my colleagues.
It's good that the members of this committee come along to that if they can.
Sorry, I've got a bit of an issue here with my Vice Chair. Mandy.
I was just going to answer Councillor Wright's question on the NI, if that is helpful to come back immediately. So I will read what it says. We won't know the grant funding until the settlement, final settlement, which is what I said at the start of the budget meeting. Our indications are that the estimated cost to the council is around £2.6 million per annum.
Thank you very much. Okay, so that finishes our piece of work, I think, on the work plan. Obviously, you will be expecting the minutes from our last meeting to come to the next meeting, which actually will be quite fortuitous because that will also coincide with, I think it's children's services as well, and which is what the bulk of our meeting last time was on. Now, I wanted to ask a quick question of the panel. So this doesn't necessarily need everybody else to be here. So I'm very happy to close the meeting now so I can ask my question of the panel.